tłumaczy i tak dalej. Proszę się upewnić, żebyśmy nie mieli żadnych przesunięć. Okay, so welcome everybody once again. So we just start today a second debate. The second debate is today, and the first one was on the 20th of February. And the first debate was on basically Community of European Nations, according to the Robert Schuman. And we were discussing that time, you know, as well, hesitating the very big, dangerous process leading to the superstate. So we concluded we don't like to have a superstate. We would like to have a Community of European Nations. And today the second debate is included within 12 debates up to December. So each month we have a one debate on different topics. And today we have a topic about, you know, the lack of the economic solidarity in European Union. So the main, a focus of this debates is we have these debates under the title Schuman's debate on renewing the European Union. So we would like to renew this European Union, otherwise we are going, we will have many troubles. And today we will like, you know, to hesitate these issues, the lack of the economic solidarity from a different perspectives. We have excellent, you know, speakers and disputants from many countries. Because, you know, this debate is basically going to have a common voice of a different, you know, experts, politicians, you know, and as well, you know, people, journalists, and as well, you know, the people from all European countries. So therefore, we would like, you know, to have these conclusions out of that, you know, debates. And these conclusions are going to be put in a written report. So we are going at the end of December or beginning of the next year to prepare a report which will, you know, show the recommendations, what to change in the European Union so that to, improve the quality of the social model and the quality of the economic model. So nowadays, today, we are going, you know, to hesitate more deeply this more economic issues, but not only from the perspective of the economists, but as well from the perspective of the other people like politicians and different, you know, experts from international affairs perspective. So we are very glad, you know, because that time we broadcast that debate to a potential number of listeners and participants in the social media in Poland and in different European countries, which amounts up to over 1 million people. So there is a very important, you know, that we engage, you know, to that, you know, thinking process and this, you know, dialogue process, according to the Schuman, you know, to potential number of over 1 million people. So this is a approach which Schuman basically, you know, was developing, the approach to integrate people, you know, the approach to basically create a community on the level of a different, intellectual level, on the level of the expert, you know, the values level, spiritual level, and different, you know, important and human, you know, areas of perception. So let me just first give a floor for Zbigniew Kedacz, who is a representative of a very, a big society of the, enterprises. They are, there is a group, you know, of the enterprises who, create a very big business, you know, not only in Poland, but as well in Europe. So they are exporters, you know, they are contributors to the development of the economy, of Polish economy, and in an international economy as well, the European economy. So we would like, speaking of Kedacz, who is a lawyer, ask, about the business perspective. So we would like you talk about the business perspective. And the question to you is, does the current European Union competition policy allow for unfair competition or fair competition? So we would like, to get from your opinion about, do we face a fair competition or unfair competition, and what type of problems are existing because of the bad functioning of the European Commission and bad functioning of the European institutions? What are the dangers for, a competition? We know as an economist that, a wrong environment, competitive environment, is a very, degrading component for the entire economy. So creating a very good environment for the competition will basically impact in a positive way for the development of the particular countries and as well the European Union as a whole. So speaking of Kedacz, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So first of all,
don't hear your voice. Is that hello?
Yes,
Richard, everything is okay?
Hello. Yes, is everything okay? Can you hear me?
My nie słyszymy głosu.
Nie słychać tylko w studio. Uczestnicy słyszą.
So go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So first of all, allow me to thank you for having me here. I'm very glad to be able to present some of these ideas, especially since the topic is not well known, and not only it is very important, but also sometimes it seems that well, obviously it is not in the very mainstream of ideas. It is not in the very mainstream of the discussion throughout the European Union. So I've created well, no, maybe allow me to say something else. Allow me to apologize for what I'm going to say, because sometimes when I'm looking at what I've prepared, it might seem a little bit too dry or too technical. And after all, I'm only a lawyer, I'm only an attorney at law, and so forgive me for that, forgive me. There are only so many things that I'm able to present in an approachable manner. I only hope that what I'm going to show you is interesting enough. And having all that in mind, I've presented a short presentation. And well, I'm just hoping that I'll be able to put that presentation through. Yes. Can the participants see my presentation?
Yes, we see that.
Okay. Very well. So, as you can see, except for the fact that I'm an attorney at law, I do also represent the Think About the Future Foundation, which is based in Nowy Sącz. It is a foundation that gathers quite a number of small, medium, and also large Polish firms that prefer to think about that would like to engage in building a better future for all of us inside the European Union. So when it comes to the key question, does the current EU competition policy allow for unfair competition? First of all, let's have a look at the basic principles of European competition policy. Those principles are very, very simple. They are based in, quite literally, only 3 articles of the treaty. The first one, that's Article 101 of the treaty, it simply says that certain agreements between competitors are prohibited. Commonly, those prohibited agreements are called cartels. That's, yeah, everybody knows what a cartel is. Article 102 is less clear, but is so important. That article prohibits abuse of one company's dominant position. What that means is that if there is a company that occupies, let's say, 80% or 90% of a given market, just like, for example, Google occupies 90% of the market for web searches, then certain market activities are prohibited, are precluded from that company occupying dominant position. So this is the material, the substantive law. But when it comes to the procedure, Article 105 of the treaty entrusts enforcing those two previously mentioned articles to the European Commission. And this is as simple as it gets. Only 3 articles, they would fit, I'm pretty sure, on an A4 page of text. That's just it. Of course, this is only the first half of the equation. The second half is what we can do in our countries. The European Commission enforces the European part of the competition law, whereas the national competition authorities enforce our local competition laws in each single member country. In Poland, we've got the UOKiK, which stands for Urząd Ochrony Konkurencji i Konsumentów in Polish, or the Office for Protection of Consumers and Competition in English. So the relation between these two entities, between European Commission and national competition authorities in each country, as you can see on the screen, it really boils down to, it is obviously regulated, and what it boils down to is that the Commission takes care of large cases, and the national competition authorities, they do handle the small cases. This is a rather sensible principle, really. The national competition authorities, they do not have enough authority to handle large cases throughout the whole Europe. So this is the theory of the European competition policy. The problem with it is that before 2005, the European Commission's principle in enforcing competition law has been very simple. We see an infringement of competition law, we investigate it, and if there is an infringement, we fine it. And it didn't really matter whether the infringement was a large one or a small one or a giant one, whether the prohibited whether the undertaking infringed competition rules in one country or 2 countries, in 5 countries, or in 10 countries. The size of the infringement didn't really play that much of a role. They saw an infringement and the Commission saw an infringement and took care of it. And what you can see are only 3. These are very young decisions of the European Commission, in which the Commission which are examples of what I've just said. So the Commission saw an infringement that didn't really pertain to a very important branch of the market. And that wasn't really a very important market looking from the intra-EU trade perspective. But the Commission saw an infringement and took care of it. In all of these cases, these are only 3 cases, but I could cite many, many more. However, the problem came in 2005, and the European Commission's attitude towards enforcing competition policy changed. And what the Commission does right now is the Commission takes care of, forgive me for using that word, but this is the word that best describes what the cases I am going to say. The cases I'm going to talk about. The Commission engages in cases that the Commission deems to be sexy. So these are large cases. These are cases against tech giants like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Intel, and well, there's the case against Gazprom as well. Which obviously Gazprom is not a tech giant, but these cases, they've got something in common. First of all of these cases are cases against entities from outside of the European Union. Secondly, most of these cases are cases against tech giants. And unfortunately, these cases, well, have to say that they are huge, and due to them being huge, the Commission has run out of its resources to take care of cases which are not as large as these ones. How does the Commission do that? How does the Commission change its policy? How does the Commission decide to take care of a Google case, but not of a case from Czech, Polish, or any other market? Well, this is a very simple. Mechanism. As you can see, yes, this is the section about law in action. According to well-established, actually, case law, the Commission can choose the cases it deems to be of utmost priority. And if the Commission thinks that the case shouldn't be treated with priority, it is allowed to reject a case. It is allowed to decide not to take care of it, not to investigate it at any stage of that case, to speak the truth. So the Commission can reject a complaint on the ground that there's not enough priority and that there's an insufficient European Union interest in further investigation of the case. Now, don't get me wrong. This principle, which I've just laid down, this is not a principle that emerged in 2005. This is a very old principle, and honestly, it does make some sense. If you are looking at these cases, well, some of them are from before 2005, some of them are a little bit older. And if you look at these cases, quite a lot of them from before 2005, those were simply either very weak cases in which the Commission decided that there's no point in investigating because there's no point in wasting resources to participate in a case in which there is absolutely no chance of finding a competition policy in competition law infringement, or some of those cases were also cases in which the alleged infringement took place in only one country. So it was pretty much obvious that it would be that national competition authority from that country would be better placed than the Commission to investigate. So in some of these cases, this principle was well applied, but then the problem is that what the Commission did was to take a rather sensible principle and apply it in most of the cases it gets. So right now, there is a huge gap between two categories of cases when it comes to competition law. There are the largest cases that the European Commission handles, and these are the cases I've discussed a moment ago. Cases like Microsoft, like Google, like Gazprom, etc., etc. And these are the largest cases that there are. And national competition authorities are able to handle small local cases, which is also pretty much common. There is a gap, and there is a growing category of cases which are too large for the NCAs and not large enough for the Commission. Before 2005, it was the European Commission that handled those cases. Right now, the Commission rejects those cases on the principle of them not having the sufficient EU interest. And this, of course, constitutes a huge problem, because if the Commission continues to work in that manner, that means that the intra-EU trade is with no or little competition law enforcement, because they cannot count on the NCAs, on the national competition authorities, because those cases are large for those, and they cannot count on the European Commission because those cases are, well, apparently too small for the European Commission. And honestly, this problem is a problem that this is a major problem for companies from the new member states, from the 2004 enlargement. well, obviously, this is a very large topic in itself. But in general, as you can see, there is a coincidence in that shift in policy, which came about in late 2005 and early 2006, and the 2004 EU enlargement. And in general, this competition, this commission shift of policy left a major number of entrepreneurs from the new member states to fend for themselves and to, well, fight the competition fight against large incumbent companies from France, Germany, and so on. So, well, what can be done about that? There is a number of things that can be done about that, and actually one of those has been presented in here, because it is true that the EU sees this gap, sees this problem, and tries to empower national competition authorities, tries to provide them with more power in order to be able to take some of those cases that are left in between, that are left in the gap. But the problem is that this is going to take time, and since 2005, we don't really have an effective enforcement of competition policy, and we are not going to have, it seems dubious that we are going to have one during the next, well, 5 or 10 years. This is a very critical period. What can be done about that? I would love to say just one quick remark to say that this is the thing that we can do in order to alleviate these problems. Unfortunately, as with most complicated mechanisms, it cannot be done in a single stroke. I would rather say that there is a couple of things that can be done in order to at least partially alleviate this problem. Well, first of all, there are three. Well, except for I've been talking right now about public enforcement of the competition law. There are those two types of public enforcement: the EU level, which is held by the European Commission, and within national borders, which is conducted by the national competition authorities. There is, however, a third type of that. That's private enforcement, which basically means if you are being harassed by a competitor, you can sue. The problem with that in Poland, however, is that we don't really have a tradition of that. In Belgium, in Holland, there is a long tradition of suing for competition law and public competition law infringements. In Poland, we don't really have that. We don't have enough expertise to do it effectively right now. And honestly speaking, at this very moment, well, the courts are not the most effective tool to be used by competitor, by an undertaker. So what can be done about that? Well, there needs to be a very clear separation of jurisdictions between the European Commission and national competition authorities, because if a case can be rejected just like that by the European Commission, if the case can be rejected without a clear separation of powers, without a clear rule saying that when it comes to this case, it is the European Commission that is supposed to take care of it, and with these others, this is the NCAs, national competition authorities, that are supposed to handle those cases. Without that clear separation of jurisdictions or powers, nothing good will come out of it, and we will be left in a quagmire. Empowering NCAs, giving them broader powers in order to allow them to be able to investigate not only small cases that are confined within the borders of a single state, but also to investigate in cross-border cases. That would be a very, very good move. This is obviously a thing that we can do on our own here in Poland. And also, in private enforcement, that is also a way to go. This is going to be a very gradual process, but it needs to be consistent. Private enforcement needs to be consistently implemented as a manner of enforcing competition on one's own. Everybody can do it on their own if there is a tool to do it. Perhaps specialized courts are also one of the many tools used in order to facilitate this process. So I'm looking at the clock right now. I'm afraid that I've gone beyond the time limit, for which I'm sorry. But hopefully this is the last slide. Thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, I'm obviously willing to answer any or all of them according to how you'd like me to proceed. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, for your contribution. And just wait during, our discussion and debate here. We are going to have some questions to you so that you can extend your point of view and the issues you raised. And now, I would appreciate, a call for taking a floor, Professor David Reichert. David, are you with us? Hello, David.
Yes, I'm here. I'm going to
Yes, thanks a lot. I am almost
activate my.
See your window. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
Welcome.
there I am. Okay.
Welcome,
Right.
welcome, David. Thanks a lot. You are here. So I would like to David, ask you, you are an American expert, and if you would like, to approach that issue of solidarity or rather a lack of solidarity, trying, to put the economic solidarity in the United States versus economic solidarity in the European Union. There are differences, and what we can, use from that, what you have in a practice or as a very good working best practices in the US for the improvement of the economic solidarity in the European Union. So go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the invitation to talk with you today for about 15 minutes, I understand.
Yes.
And I think the best thing I can do is set out kind of the American economic philosophical perspective, and maybe approach it that way. As we all know, President Trump just finished his term as United States president, and we have the new president, Joseph Biden. And this is going to ostensibly signal quite a big change in the economic relations between the United States and the European Union. And I'd just like to highlight a few of these, the major differences between the Trump approach to Europe and the Biden approach to Europe, from a more of a political, I'm a political scientist, so this will be more of a political economy analysis rather than pure economic analysis. Well, as most of us know, President Trump was an economic, very much an economic isolationist. Trump, he had a so-called America First agenda. And this America First phrase, it did not mean global domination by the Americans. In fact, just the opposite. It meant kind of an American economic nationalism, focusing first on America and American economy, American jobs. Trump was, in my estimation, what I might call a weak federalist or a loose federalist. That is, he supported very strongly the right of the states, of the 50 states, to develop their own economies, but that Washington could help out in this process. And how could Washington do this? Well, Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again," was really about reordering U.S. economic foreign policy. That is, reducing American trade deficits. Not only trade deficits with Asia, of course, we know about the famous Trump trade war with China, but also with the European Union, trying to, from the Trump administration perspective, rebalance the economic trade relation and create a more American solidarity in economic trade from his perspective. The idea here from the Trump people was to bring back manufacturing jobs that had long been outsourced to other parts of the world, particularly China, to bring back these manufacturing jobs by raising tariffs so that the American manufacturers would no longer find it profitable to produce their goods in China or the other Asian, especially the little tigers, or the little dragons, as we call them, Vietnam and South Korea, Singapore. And so that was basically the very simple strategy of Donald Trump. The idea was to redevelop the American so-called Rust Belt. Maybe you've heard of the Rust Belt in the United States. It's an economic region that encompasses states like Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And isn't it interesting that these were exactly the states that were so critical in winning the election for Trump in 2016, and were so critical for Joseph Biden to prevail against Trump in November 2020, these Rust Belt states where manufacturing jobs have been lost due to overseas outsourcing. Just a bit more about Trump. Trump's idea, and by the way, this economic idea, it has actually led to a lot of economic new thinking, because the old thinking was that these manufacturing jobs in Europe, in old North America, had long gone to Asia and they would never come back. But the economic new thinking is no, some of these jobs can return. And Trump was kind of cheerleading this approach. Now, again, we can debate that from an economic perspective, but certainly in areas of biotech, polymer industry, infotech, robotics, can be a lot of possibilities there for manufacturing to come back to Europe and to come back to the Rust Belt regions of the United States. What's kind of interesting, well, as you know, probably Trump canceled a lot of international free trade agreements. He canceled the Trans-Pacific Partnership in 2017, a liberal economic partnership with Asian countries and Canada and several other countries around the world. He canceled or he killed the American participation in the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or the TTIP, very liberal, a neoliberal trade pact, a proposal between the European Union and the United States. Trump said, no way, absolutely. He renegotiated the NAFTA treaty with Mexico and Canada to be ostensibly more favorable to the United States in terms of the trade balance. And then he threatened and actually put tariffs on the European Union in terms of aluminum and steel imports into the United States. And he threatened other tariffs on agriculture, car parts, other manufactured products coming into the USA. Just as a side note, this is kind of interesting about Trump canceling the U.S. participation in the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership with the European Union, because Trump formed a non-formal alliance with European environmentalists who were also very much against the TTIP. So that was ironic, but obviously they were against it, the TTIP, for totally different reasons, of course. But that was an interesting alliance, non-official alliance between the Trump people and European environmentalists. Now, what has happened, well, with Joe Biden? Now, what's the situation with Biden? Well, Biden is, I would say, in many respects, the polar opposite, traditionally, from Trump, from his economic perspective. Biden is an economic internationalist. He is an American neoliberal in economics. He's a globalist. He's a multilateralist. He believes in very dominant, I would say strong federalism, where Washington takes a very leading role in the federal relationship with the American states. And, you know, Joseph Biden, he comes much more from the corporate elite, Wall Street, faction than does Trump. That's interesting. A lot of people see Trump as a corporatist. Trump was never a corporatist, a Wall Street type. You know, Trump made his millions in real estate. He didn't make it on Wall Street through corporate investing. Of course, he has a lot of corporate investments, but it's Biden who is really the corporatist elite. And Biden represents this corporate elite wing of the Democratic Party. The other wing of the Democratic Party in the United States is the progressive left wing, which ironically Trump kind of co-opted in his election victory in 2016. Trump reached out to the working class in those Rust Belt areas that had lost those manufacturing jobs, and he co-opted a large portion of Democratic voters for his 2016 victory. And I think Biden now, Biden has learned from the Trump victory. So Biden has had to temper or push down his neoliberal economic globalist tendencies and talk to those working class American Rust Belt voters to maintain his standing and to have any chance for re-election in the future. Few more things I'd like to add about Biden. Well, of course, Biden is anti-protectionist. He's a globalist, a neoliberal. He rejoined the Paris Climate Accord, as you know. Okay, what about the transatlantic trade and investment partnership with the European Union? Will Joseph Biden resurrect that agreement? Well, I think he might like to do that. But as I just mentioned, he's got now to think about these working class middle Americans, these Rust Belt Americans. So I don't think he can go fully down the neoliberal path again, as Bill Clinton did, for example, in the 1990s. He's got to kind of straddle these two wings of the Democratic coalition in the United States, the working class portion and the corporate elitist portion that benefits from global free trade. Also, I believe, as far as I know, the European Union has said that the transatlantic trade and investment partnership is dead. So the whole thing would have to be renegotiated. It could not be the same proposal. In the meantime, however, I think President Biden, together with his trade representative, Mr. Robert Lighthizer, they will work actively with the Europeans on the transatlantic economic relations through the so-called Transatlantic Economic Council, which is an agency created in 2007 to smooth over the rough areas in U.S. and European Union economic relations. So I imagine that Biden will actively pursue better relations with the Europeans in a trade sense through the Transatlantic Economic Council. Also, I believe another reason why Joseph Biden will not go wholly back to a globalist, neoliberal American economic agenda is because now we know much more about China. And we know, and especially with all the bad media coverage of the coronavirus with China, and also the media coverage of what's going on in China with human rights and the Muslim minority there, and on, I think there's no way that Joe Biden, a la Bill Clinton, can go back to the Democratic neoliberal radical free trade agenda with China and the little tigers. So I think he's going to have to go very slowly in that direction. He's not going to be able to reverse what Trump created immediately. And I think those are my major observations. One thing worrying for the Americans vis-a-vis China is that Europe has not really seen China as the threat that the Americans see, economically speaking. For example, the Belt and Road initiative of China. Europe has, in general, some of the countries of the EU, such as Austria and Italy, as you know, have reacted favorably to China's Belt and Road proposals. And so, yeah, so this is a big difference economically. I see the Americans being much tougher on China than Europe, even under a Biden administration, for the reasons that I mentioned. Other than that, I'm very appreciative of the invitation today, and I look forward to a more debate and any questions later in our program regarding some of the points that I raised here. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Professor Reichert, for very clear and nice, reflecting, that I think, very major important issues. And some certain conclusions which are arising from the administration of Joe Biden, and some, indication for European Union. So that's, I think, I would agree with your point of view. I don't know how the others are approaching that. You said what you said. So
by the way, if I might just add one more thing.
Yes.
President Trump represented a very traditional strain in American politics called isolationism. Isolationism has existed in an uneasy relationship with globalism in American history, as you probably know. Famous isolationists in American history go back to George Washington, of course. And then we have Mark Twain was a famous American isolationist. William Jennings Bryan, Herbert Hoover, whereas the globalists in the American historical story, including people like William McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt, of course, the first American globalist, Woodrow Wilson. So we've got this kind of ping-pong effect in American political life between the isolationist strain of politics and the globalists. And so I see Biden coming a little bit back to more to the globalist side. So the one thing,
from Freeze's community of Freeze's nations, we hope, what is our common business in that region is that Biden will, exercise much pressure on Russia so that to really stop the Nord Stream 2, because this is a very big, project which endangers for the entire region, not only Poland, but, the entire region of the Freeze's countries. And we hope sometimes it is going to stop. The Germany doesn't realize that, what can be the consequences. So we believe Joe Biden, we ask Joe Biden to not give up, to not give up, make your best. So thanks a lot again, and as some certain questions will arrive later on, so the audience can ask you for the extension. So the next, our speaker, Professor Ben Oni Ardelen from Romania, and Professor is a politician who is sitting in the parliament, and as I know, the member of the European Parliament as well. And we would like, to be some kind, show the politician perspective on that topic we are discussing today. The topic is related to the lack of the solidarity, economic solidarity. And if you would like to try to answer the question, how much European Union suffers from the lack of the economic solidarity and how it can be changed. So be some kind to present your opinion about that, and floor is yours, Professor. Welcome. Thank you very much. You find a time to arrive because I know you are very busy.
Thank you so much. Very much appreciate, and I would like to greet all the participants and all of those that are going to view this conference later on. I think it's very important to state from the beginning that the whole community was created, the whole EU was created in order to facilitate the economical view and to facilitate the economical exchange and to facilitate the economical support of each other. And starting with that, we have to start from the beginning, that the whole development also started with the Marshall Plan. And this was the basis and the backup for all the big economies right now that we know in Western Europe that had a huge plan of development that was a solidarity international-wise, which was supporting those countries to grow. And so EU was growing gradually, and it was extending gradually with countries that were on the periphery of Europe, on the edge of Europe, as is the case of Romania, where I'm the member of the parliament, and some other countries that joined much later EU. In this case, of course, there was huge support for those countries at the beginning, in order with the pre-adherence funds, with money that were given to them in order to high up and grow the IQ of the community. But there were, of course, many other things that happened meanwhile. I think the biggest test for us of the solidarity was through the pandemia. Because we had a kind of major type of relationship. We started to think about final touch in our community deals. And finally, we were hit first by the Brexit and then by the Pandemia, which were two main shocks and two main tests for EU. In terms of economical point of view, right now, at least in some of the countries, we talk about the resilience plans to develop and to help regrow the economies that were much hit by the pandemia. But of course, those funds are given to those countries in order to kind of protect the whole union. It's not just to help each of the individual country to grow. And I think if you don't talk in the terms of solidarity, we are missing one essential moral issue that we need to talk about. And this is the fact that the liberal type of capitalism, this kind of jungle capitalism have much been exposed, and it's kind of the end of the lifetime that was supposed to be in most of the democracies in the world, because we realize that we need to have a solidarity with the people that are poor, with the people that are at the edge of the society, with the people that don't have the support, with the people in need. This is not only a biblical term, but it's also a principle that helps the society, because right now most of the politicians, the theoreticians in the political arena have realized that we need a social plan for them. We need a welfare liberalism, which is right now the most important one, even in a society. So to put this in a bigger scheme, to put this in the scheme of EU, I think it's very important to have this component of social welfare, of liberal welfare, because everyone needs to enjoy at least a decent life. Everyone needs to have at least the basic things which will help them survive and be in a democratic world respected, and be in a democratic world at the same table with the ones to take the decisions. Which these discrepancies between poor countries, not poor countries, those countries that are at the edge of the EU, those countries that are in the central of decision of EU, I think those type of attitudes should be very soon be given away to this type of attitude and this type of behavior, because otherwise experiences like Brexit could occur anytime. And we have right now the case of Poland that is very unpleasant with what is going. We have the case of Hungary, which is very unpleasant of what's going, and many other voices. And Euroscepticism that is growing because of this type of attitude, more than bureaucracy and some other things. I think the attitude of the leaders is very important toward those countries, because otherwise we're going to face more Brexit type of things in the EU. So my pledge is to think about a way to kind of sit at the same table, to kind of respect all the partners, and to also to support them as they were supported, as I mentioned at the beginning, with the Marshall Plan. I think right now the resilience plan of EU should be in place in a proper way in order to support the countries to go over the effects of the pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor, for your contribution. And yeah, you basically didn't use your time up to 15 minutes. So if you would like to, I would, ask you the additional question, if I may. I mean, the additional question would be, how you perceive, there is some certain currently discussion about the creating of the fraction, Schuman fraction at the European Parliament. So the lack of the solidarity you mentioned, I really agree, showing that, we cannot allow that some countries are on the edge in the, worst situation. And creating a Schuman fraction at the European Parliament could basically integrate the different people for whom basically the community of European nations, from the perspective of the economic solidarity, is very close. Nowadays, there are many people, thinking in a way like Schuman approach, are just sitting, with the APP group or the Conservative Party or some socialist party. And I know, according to my knowledge, that many people from Portugal, Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, Hungary, Latvia, they just think exactly like Schuman approach. If we speak in a context of the economic solidarity, what do you think, as a very, very experienced politician, to implement that idea, to create a bigger force and the power to implement these recommendations you spoke about the removing the lack of the economic solidarity. So again, how you would perceive that proposal to implement to create the Schuman fraction at the European Parliament?
Yeah, I think there are two different issues that I'll see. As a very practical politician, I think the best thing is to just create a group that is joining the idea without forcing them to go from one political family to another. Because I think it's very important right now to just create a movement regarding some of the ideas that we have, at least on the conservative side. And if we create this type of movement, because right now it's a lack of this type of movement or attitude, even in EPP, which is a Christian Democrat group, but it's a lack of that. Some of my colleagues have voted last week, even regarding the LGBT free land community, which is a big shock to some of my friends, or most of the population, at least in Romania, which is a conservative country. But again, this type of conservative view and that are based on the principle of Christian morals, I think they are very important right now to kind of be very solid and be very outspoken and be something that could create at least a movement around them. And then I think if time will gonna go in the same direction, or things will gonna go in the same direction, we're gonna see maybe a new group coming up with a very conservative perspective that will basically have a solid background and also solid support from the population. Because people are up to sufficiency with what we've seen in the last time. Also, again, with the support of some of the what's so-called the conservative groups.
Thank you very much for your response. So stay with. So you would like to add something, please?
No. Thank you. I'm just happy to be with you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I know you are very busy, but stay with us. Stay with us. There is going to be a more exciting, opinion and discussion in that time. So we go ahead with the next, a speaker, a rather disputant, a Professor Pablo de la Fuente. So, Professor, are you with us? Could you show up? Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yes.
We see you now.
Do you listen me?
Yeah, I see, Professor. So, Professor, would you be so kind? I just, if you allow, I give you 15 minutes. So, about from your international affairs expert's perspective, because you are basically expert in that area, how you would, approach the economic solidarity or lack of it at the European Union? How you could, draw that picture, and what are the deficiencies and what we need to improve? The floor is yours, Professor.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your kind invitation, Professor Krysiak. And well, now in the European Union, in my humble point of view, we live in an atmosphere of solidarity after the Brexit. This is idea because after the Brexit, we, the Europeans, we are paying the vaccination program of the United Kingdom. I don't understand really the policy of Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, but all this contract with AstraZeneca and the University of Oxford, finally, we have a lot of delay in our programs of vaccination, but with the Europeans funds after the Brexit, we are the Europeans, the poor Europeans, the Polish, the Romanians, the Bulgarians, in solidarity with the Brexits. And now with the European funds, basically the reality nowadays is that we are paying the successful vaccination campaign in the United Kingdom. Well, I don't understand why Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen didn't resign yet. It's a lack of the defense of the interests of the Europeans. The second point, this is a kind introduction. The second point that I want to talk is about the idea of solidarity. I prefer the word cooperation, because solidarity is the rich who help the poor. And cooperation is when two human beings cooperate in the same goal. I prefer this word. The connotation of we must be solidarian with Africa, for example. A huge risk, no? Because I'm not an expert in macroeconomics or in financial, but I learned a lesson. Nowadays, the word solidarity has an economic relationship with the word credit. We must help all these countries with credit, but credit is a trap, because the credit is the debt, and the debt is the strategy in order to remove the international order. It's like in ancient times in Rome, for example, at the moment that a citizen has a debt with another citizen, legally, if he cannot solve this debt, become his slave. And for example, in my point of view, is the strategy for example, now is China developing in the Black Africa, for example, with soft credits, buying the public debt of these countries, and in South America, the most scandalous case is the case of Venezuela. And for me, it's important. Take careful with the word solidarity and the word philanthropic, a very, very risky terms. I want to remember now the owner of a high tech who now has a foundation, and he vaccinates a lot of people in Africa against several diseases, but also provoking the sterilization of a lot of women. Provoked. Nowadays, perhaps the solidarity in the world is pursue legally this magnate, this owner of a high-tech company who provide us software for this conference. And I don't know why the international court doesn't put him in jail, because he is a criminal after that. Solidarity for me is this concept. The criminals pay for these crimes. the third question that I want to talk, for example, this word solidarity is dangerous because is this cycle. Solidarity, humanitarian help, credits, debt, and is the strategist, for example, of people like George Soros and another globalist. No? For example, let me talk about one case that is a subject of my lessons in the university, is the case of Argentina. Argentina is like a Poland in the American countries. It's a country with a Catholic tradition. The most part of the population of Argentina are Italian immigrants, like nowadays the Pope Francis, and also a community of Spaniards. But also there are a tradition of tolerance. A lot of people from Russia, Jews from Russia. In Argentina, we don't see a Jew. It's a Russian. Well, this is a tradition of tolerance. And there are, Argentina has been a traditional country, close to the Christian moral. Well, the poor management of the Argentinian authorities was the end in the elections of Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. The left leave the power, and the new on the new right side, the government led by Macri has a problem with the public debt. The left in this world is a machine to create poor people, no? And well, what is the solution? The debt. Well, and this is the negotiation of Mr. Macri with the International Monetary Fund. Well, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, provide $7,000 million to Argentina. And what was the first consequence? In a country with a Christian tradition like Argentina, we have now, in the last weeks, the new abortion law. This is the consequence. And this is the kind of enemies that we must affront. And this was the question. Hence, I prefer to talk about cooperation between equal people. We can cooperate one of them with the other one. For our Polish public in this conference, I follow the negotiation of the rescue of the solidarity fund for the crisis of coronavirus. And well, every day I talk with my colleagues in the university in order to have the idea of the Polish position, and I follow all the information about Poland and Hungary in the Spanish media during this negotiation. Well, Poland is a disaster, an ultra-Catholic, pro-fascist country, and the crisis of the Constitutional Tribunal, all this kind of propaganda. I follow the sources, the most part of them made in Brussels. Sometimes the Spanish media repeat the information of the Brussels agencies of information, and well, I follow the strategy of the Polish government. Normally, professors in the university, our favorite sport is to criticize the politics. It's like in Italy, piove porco governo. It's raining, the guilty for the government. Well, in this case, I want, today the Minister of Foreign Affairs is not in our conference, but I want to congratulate him, because during this negotiation, I think the Polish government defended the interests of Poland in a spirit of equals. The connotation of Poland, of Hungary and Bulgaria in Europe is these poor people, pro-fascist, who lives of the money of Brussels. This is not true. This is not true. For countries like France and Germany, Poland is an outstanding market of 40 million of consumers. This spirit of some superiority of the creators of the European Union against the poor nations, I think in this negotiation, the performance of the Polish negotiators in the funds against the crisis of coronavirus has been, in my point of view, following the Spanish sources of information, very intelligent. We, the people who live, I'm not Polish, but the people like me who live in Poland, we are proud of the strategy of the Polish government. It's like Robert Lewandowski's goal, effective and elegant. And this is first of all, the main strategies that the Christian countries, the Catholic countries must follow. We cooperate together. Mrs. Merkel or Mr. Macron. We are equals and we negotiate and we cooperate. For me, this has been a change of chip. Poland became a member in this negotiation, in my point of view. And this is in order to conclude, because I want to be brief, if you are some question, but what is the solution in the future for build a solidarity between the Christianity, the European nations with a Christian tradition? I think I will do, I ask permission, a Marxist analysis. Marx was, well, in my opinion, was a neo-Kantian. He thought that he was a materialist, but I think that in sometimes Karl Marx was an idealist and a neo-Kantian philosopher who he think to explain all the things has only one reason, and the world is more complicated, and also the psychology of the human being. I think that nowadays the neo-Marxists is not the Marxist tradition, it's the Gramsci's tradition, the tradition of Antonio Gramsci, that he thought the change in the society is not a problem of a structure in Marxist terms, like Marx explained. It's the question of the superstructure. Watch that all this strategy of the globalist nowadays is the most dangerous oligarchy in the world, is provoke social changes. Remember the case of Argentina. Do you want the money of the IMF? Well, approve an abortion law. And I think that the battle must be, well, in terms of a structure of the political fight, is clear. But I propose a strategy long term and for me the key is this Marxist superstructure. Is if we are Christian nations, come back to our root. First of all, the family that the globalists are very interesting to destroy, and an education, and a public education in the values of the Christian moral for me is the key. You must create the man for doing a relationship in terms of cooperation or solidarity. Well, this is all my exposition. If you have some question, good. If not, I will learn the next speakers. Thank you very much, Mr. Christian, and the public.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Pablo de la Fuente. You are very known from very, original opinions and original approach, which I value very much because it gives very good added value to any discussion. you are like advocatus diabolis, and this is a very, important, a contribution to any dialogue, to any discussion, because we should be critical, and we should be, critical from the constructive point of view. And I like very much indeed your original approach to, hesitate, many issues. So I would like, to have the question to you, touching again what I asked Professor Ben Oni Ardelen, about the Schuman group from, a Schuman movement around the European Union, around the European Europe, which is going, to collect and integrate the people of a similar approach, even if many of these people are currently in different parties. How would you assess this suggestion and the direction? What do you think about that?
Well, the idea of Schuman and Adenauer was after actually in Europe, the Second World War, and well said. Well, in the last 80 years, we have 3 wars, and the final result of this war is a disaster for France, for Germany, and now the hegemony of the world for the United States. Well, this is the war after all these 3 wars is a disaster. What's the condition in order to work together? But I think also that the most important, that the ideas of Schuman, that from the 50s to from today, the world changed radically. But for me, is the idea of the Christianity. And me as a Spaniard, I have an idea. Sometimes nowadays Europe perhaps is an anti-Christian construction. And yes, this is in my humble opinion. Perhaps the people is not agree, but mainly nowadays the European Union is the first experiment, the first step of the globalists in order to create a new order. And perhaps not the structural measures, but it's a good idea to come back to the Schuman ideas in order to provoke not only a community of nations, in order not a community of states. For me, I follow sometimes the political theories of Gustavo Bueno, and one thing is the state and one other thing is the nation. The nation is the community of individuals. In this case, it's more important the individuals than the states. And hence is my conclusion that we must work, we must to be Antonio Gramsci followers, work in the individual, in the human being, because the structural changes will come if we work in this point. I think that I answered your question or not.
Thank you very much indeed. I am happy, anything you say, it's interesting for me, because, your point of view and as well, many speakers and disputants in that, group are giving an added value. So we give more colors around that topic of the solidarity of the community of European nations. And getting this, a picture from a different point of views gives us some certain more real, a picture for our certain, direction. But of course, nowadays, I think we need to very strongly go ahead with the Pan-European Union, Pan-European movement, following Robert Schuman. Of course, Professor, you mentioned Gramsci. This is great, yes, Gramsci and many other thinkers of that type. But, there is a challenge, if we would like, to change something, we are not against, like Schuman said, right? We are not against the others or the others approach, but we cannot just create a certain balance in the Europe and the European Union without our contribution. And I think nowadays the Schuman movement around Europe, pan-European movement, is very much demanded for getting a balance. Otherwise, we are just, basically forced by one direction, which is a direction to the superstate. And this direction is a kind of a monolith, kind of uniform, which is from a pure, human perspective, from the human, our personal, characteristic of any human being. This is any uniform is something against the human being. Any uniforms in Soviet Union, yes, uniforms in the Korea, North Korea, or any countries we experience, we know, brought this, society to a very, bad shoes, and finally there were many damages, many people killed, and the economy was in a destruction. So now stay with us, Professor. And now we have, Professor Karl Aichinger from Austria. Professor Aichinger is one of the co-authors of the books, and he is basically with some authors as well from Italy and France. And they were hesitating in these different papers and books, the issues related to, competitiveness, solidarity, and basically the efficiency of the economic model. So this is the area they hesitated in different considerations. And as I, read their basically papers, I noticed that they were getting from quite the very beginning, from the end of the war, they considered, hesitated, the steel and coal community and the economic European Union, economic community of economic nations, and they made a very big contribution to that, considerations. But I think they, tried to approach the economic solidarity in a little bit different way. And I would like to, I would appreciate if all of our speakers today and disputants will just, try to listen to the presentation of Professor Karl Aichinger, who is not able to be online, but he recorded a video. And we will now, show this video, which takes around 15 minutes. And afterwards, I would appreciate your comments on that. So let's go ahead with that video. So we are ready. Are you ready, Richard?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead, just włączamy. Let's start, the video of the Professor Karl Aichinger from Austria, and his, biography is on the website. And yes, thanks a lot. Go ahead.
Speaking about solidarity, competition, and welfare in the European Union. I am Karl Aichinger, Director of the Policy Crossover Center, Vienna, Europe, and Professor at the Vienna University of Economics. I will speak about the following.
It was in that point some technical issue, but in just a few seconds. Yeah, now it's continued.
Director of the European Policy Crossover Center and Professor at the University of Vienna in Economics in Vienna. I will speak about the European Unification Project, which I call a success story, which has, however, midlife problems. European Union to deepen it and the danger of challenge from populism. We have also other challenges of the 16th century, climate change and new inequality. And finally, I will come to the New World Order 3.0, in which both Europe to be a quality leader. Let us start the European unification project. It is really a success story. A conflict-ridden continent is now a peaceful continent with no war and conflict within the current members of the European Union, and the number of the members is increasing, even if Great Britain has left the European Union. 10 more countries want to access to the European market and to the European project. It's a success story. And Europe today is the largest economic area in the world. Its GDP is higher than that of the United States and higher than that of China, which is growing fast, but from a very low level. We have the midlife problems that we need more extension and more deepening. Extension means the West Balkan countries are geographical Europe, but they are not yet solve the internal conflicts, like the conflict between Serbia and the Kosovo. Problems which should be and can be only solved on the European level. It really, the members are willing to give this responsibility to the European level. They want more own plans. Let us call some of the problems. For example, problem of climate change can be solved only if there are goals defined on the European level, and if the member countries then tell and are monitored in this how they contribute to this problem. Deep means also that we have a common strategy for the COVID crisis, which is like developing and distributing a vaccination and preventing protectionism of each single countries. And we have the problem that some countries which have very much profited from the European unification are not willing to accept this. For example, look at, for example, at Hungary. Hungary has caught up with the West, as all new formerly socialist countries have done. But they are not acknowledging that the success of the European unification, and they try to tell their citizens that it is the success of their own government. 4% of the national product of Hungary are now given by transfers from the European Union, but Orban is that it is European Union is a problem which interferes into Hungarian problems if the democracy is reduced and if new autocratic tendencies are developed. And there's always some external enemy, the problem if it is. And we have the problems that European is an aging, has an aging population which is decreasing, and migration would be one of the problems which could help to solve it, and solidarity would be necessary, not nationalistic policies. But the same is happening in Italy with Matteo Salvini, in France with Le Pen. Everywhere, populist parties are endangering the European problems and go for own national solutions, which makes the things worse. The same for the COVID crisis, for example. So it can be solved only by new vaccinations, which are developed and distributed by the European Commission, and this cannot be solved on the national level. And we are facing new challenges in this century. Climate change is visible everywhere, be it in dissertation, climate change, in storms, in weather caprioles, and so on. And we have new inequalities. The European Union was successful in lowering inequality between countries and lowering inequality between the richest and the poorest regions in Europe. But we have here a new problem that people are flocking to the centers, to the great cities and to Central Europe, and leaving their home countries. They are partly depopulating, for example, in Bulgaria, population declining. Young people are leaving the country because they want higher incomes and expect them only if they leave the country. So new inequalities between remote areas, or as they call themselves, forgotten areas, and the centers are developing, and new strategies are necessary to confront these problems. So this is a new and there's a migration policy too. While Europe is an aging continent, Africa is a very young continent. While the population is decreasing in Europe, it is doubling in Africa. And so we need a double strategy. On the one hand, to allow some migration. On the other hand, to contribute to the economic growth in Africa, which is our neighbor continent. And only if Africa is prospering and some people are leaving from Africa to Europe, we will get an equality between Africa and the European Union. So there's a lot of challenges which need new form of governance, which is European governance. The new Economic Commission under von der Leyen is going in this direction for a social Europe, for Europe leading the fight against climate change and being a geopolitical force extending to problems in other parts of the world without military power, but as a soft power which is focusing on education and on new technologies instead of a military build-up. So we face in the next decades a new world order. I call the world order 1.0 the post-war world order, with a strong socialist bloc and a strong capitalist bloc. And then we had the world order 2.0 after the breakdown of the socialism and of the communist empire. United States were the sole remaining superpower. But again, it was proved as a very egoistic superpower, which intervened in other countries and continents, but did not help to solve the problem after some of the military coups had been successful. And this world order will not contain. And now China is trying to become world power number one on the one part with an economic force with the highest growth in as it builds roads to countries where there are resources to be grabbed, and if they are doing this, they are doing it without any responsibility of the environmental and social problems in these countries in which they invest. This is a chance for Europe to become in a world order 3.0, to become a three-polar world order with China as a strong economic force, with political problems, including those with the Uyghurs in re-education problems, with the United States, with very strong firms with very high profits and a very high inequality in their own country, with racial inequality and other forms of inequality, and going for a world order which is only built on economic goals and not on social goals. And here Europe could play an important part as the leader, which is focusing on education, which is focusing on equality, and which is focusing, striving for the leadership in prevent climate change and supporting new technologies, renewable energies, and decentral power creation. It needs a lot of solidarity within Europe, which should be downgrade the populistic and nationalist ambitions, which can be a soft power, and which will be the quality leader, which is extending its program and its model to neighbor countries, being the former socialist countries and the successor states of the Soviet Union, but also extending to North Africa, which is on the other side of Mare Nostrum, as we used to call the Mediterranean. This would be the role of Europe, to extend its success story as a quality leader in a new world order at a par with China and the United States. This is my message. It is possible with solidarity, with a larger horizon where we want to go, with new goals to become a quality leader in the world. This is a program which is our goal in the Policy Crossover Center, which is a think tank based in Vienna, which is focusing on European problems. It's an interdisciplinary think tank, not only economic, but also social solidarity, governance problems, reforming the democratic process. All we need for the welfare in Europe. And you can cooperate with us. We are a discussion forum for lateral thinking. Membership and cooperation is possible if you write to some of them. I thank you for the possibility to tell you my vision that Europe is a success model which has to solve some problem, which has to renew its agenda and extend this agenda to its neighbors, and that is possible, and that we welfare creating and we bring peace to our neighbors and the world at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Eichinger from Austria. I'm not sure Professor is listening to us on some certain platform of media, but thanks a lot that even if you were not able to be with us online, so you made efforts, to record your opinion. So now I would appreciate, just to have a feedback to that. Presentation of Professor Eichinger. So, Professor David Reichert, would you like to be some kind, 2 minutes feedback to that opinion and to that speech of Professor Eichinger, please?
Yes, thank you. Let's see, I'll make my camera here. Okay. Yes, I thought it was a very interesting and well-prepared talk. I would just disagree with the professor about his conclusions. I really do not believe that the European Union or China will be a rival to equal the United States in global affairs. That's not to say that individual European countries will not be very powerful in world affairs, such as Germany, France, Poland, and other EU states. But my personal opinion from my study of the European Union, especially the common foreign and security policy of the EU, is that it is extremely difficult to get the Europeans united in terms of global policy. Now, trade, yes, okay, maybe in trade policy, that's true. But in other realms of international relations, I just don't see it. At least not in this time, perhaps in the future. In terms of China, although certainly we could classify China as an economic superpower to a certain degree, I think China, from an ethical and moral perspective, is rather bankrupt country. And I really believe that a global power, especially one that is going to be a leader in the world, has got to have some moral credibility. It's also got to have a certain degree of freedom and to unleash creativity. So far, what we've seen from China is great production based on a lot of outsourcing and from around the world, and economic kind of brinksmanship. But I really think for China to go over that wall to become a true economic competitor for the United States, it's going to have to develop. It's going to have to develop politically. It's going to have to develop liberally and democratically, or I think it will simply be kind of a modern version of Oriental despotism. So I hate to be pessimistic, but I think to be a global power, it's a multifunctional. It cannot only be about economics. But thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Thanks a lot. So, Professor Benoni Ardelen, are you with us still? If you are, just be some kind of 2 minutes, respond to that speech of Professor Eichinger. Do you hear me?
Yes, thank you. I think we can hear each other.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's very important to know that there are things that we can put together in order to create a society. And of course, economics is the base right now of what's going on in Europe. But I think there are some other issues that we have to put in place. We have to talk about ideology. We have to talk about common doctrines. We have to talk about values. We have to talk about principles and morals. And of course, we have to talk about common interest and about common foreign affairs and many other things. So we cannot define the community, the EU, just by only one aspect, which is in this case economics. But of course, solidarity is part of economics, and it's part of our building up a community. So I think it's very important to put in place all of those issues and to talk about all of them. But when you put more accent on one or the other and leave all the others aside, or suppress one or other nations or one or other group that is not in the same position or in the same agreement with you, I think there is a friction that is going to create there. So I think those frictions should be avoided. And in my opinion, right now, there are more and more frictions, and it's a lack of solving them. And this is part of the problem.
Thanks a lot, Professor. Now, Professor Pablo de la Fuente, 2 minutes respond, please. Professor Pablo. The microphone, switch your microphone on, please. Thanks a lot. Still microphone on.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, you gave me a fame of polemist, but now I think that the analysis about China of Professor Rachel is very correct. In my humble opinion, only only now I agree with him, but I think that his analysis is correct. Other question is to take the last speaker is to take again the polemics, the debate of the last debate about the common defense, no? And I think that we talk in the last debate about this point about security and common defense, and I think that is not now is not time for that. But substantially, I am agree with Professor Reicher in several points that he's showing in his last intervention.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. So Professor Reichert mentioned about the social Europe. So I would like, basically to be in a little bit contradictory position because we need nowadays to perceive that there are many pressure coming from the bottom, from the different societies in France, Italy, Portugal, Poland, everywhere, to, implement the solidar economy. Solidar from the economist perspective, and the economic perspective, the solidar economy is much more efficient. It's much more efficient than the social economy. We have many proofs and many investigations prove that. So we need to, change our mind and, promote that from one side, the solidar economy brings to more equal economic position of every human being, families, enterprises, and from another hand is as well more efficient. So the second point, the Schuman plan for Africa, Professor Eichinger mentioned about, that we need to, arrange certain conditions outside the Europe in Africa. Yes, I agree. And Schuman mentioned about that. And Schuman, was going to basically to implement that. But unfortunately, the European economic basically community was switched to the European Union, and the power took the apostles of Spinelli, and they, went in the direction of the superstate, and they forget about, helping Africa to basically, so Schuman spoke about the plan, not only just in general terms, but as well from the financial perspective. And then I would like to mention that 2 years ago on a summit of the Freezes countries in Romania, so the president of the Croatia, Kitarovic, she had a presentation, and he presented that since the entrance to the European Union, the East European countries, the differences are increasing. So I would disagree with Professor Eichinger, who said that the differences are declining. On average, we are going up compared to that what was before. But the average is not the right measure. So in total, if we consider, different measures, related to the economic condition of the different, people, families in Europe. So these differences are increasing. So differences between West and East. So this is not true that European Union takes care enough about this, balance. So thank you very much for your great response. So now we switch to experts, tax experts, and we would like, to listen about the economic solidarity from the tax experts' perspective. And we have three great people, from Hungary, Poland. So now I would like to give a floor for Dr. Gergely Choboli, excuse me, my pronunciation, and I would like, basically you hesitate the issues related to the tax solidarity versus tax competition, regional integration facing tax issues, the role of OECD in protecting smaller countries, and the European Union policy on tax havens. And if you would like, to touch, if you like or you don't like, it depends on you, the so-called VAT mafias, right? And as I know, the Hungary, Slovenia, many countries in this region, together with Poland, with the Polish Ministry of Finance, created some certain great cooperation, which is basically giving a very good, results in a fighting of a mafia, the VAT mafias. So, Dr. Georgi Choboli, so floor is yours, and you have 20 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Professor, for the opportunity and also for the invitation. I'm asked to talk about tax competition and solidarity in taxation in 20 minutes, which will give me the opportunity to frame a big picture for you on where we are and where we are heading in the European Union, and also at the framework of the OECD on tax competition and tax cooperation, solidarity, which, in my opinion, are three different words which I will interpret to you in one of my parts. So what I can do is to give you a highlight on tax competition within the European Union, tax solidarity, where actually solidarity is there and solidarity is needed, and also areas of taxation where competition can be found, and which are success stories within the European Union, and also there are success stories within the CE region as well. So first of all, let's see where we are in different areas, and why we are doing such a great job in some areas and have no success or even no results in other areas. First, we have to conclude what competition is, what tax competition is. Is it a bad thing, a good thing, or something just a way of doing business? And if the results are bad, then change, or if solidarity is needed for some reason, then to compromise. We need to differentiate, in my opinion. So on the one side, what tax competition is, that we have different goals and we compete on that different goals. I give you an example. Investment and competition for real investments are actually part of tax policy in every country, not only in the CE region, but in every country. Countries want to have more investment in their country, want to create more jobs, and for that, tax systems and especially corporate income taxes are giving incentives. So there's a place where tax competition can be found. Is it a bad or a good thing to have tax competition? In my opinion, alone, in itself, tax competition is not a bad thing. It's a way how we force each other to be better. We give each other solutions. We compete. Not only companies can compete on the world market, but countries can compete also. And especially corporate income taxes is an area where countries competing, and not only CE countries, not only small countries, but big countries as well. So in itself, in my opinion, tax competition is not bad. If it turns out to be counterproductive for some reason, it hurts other countries, it hurts some tax policy, valid tax policies, then yes, we need to compromise, and we need tax solidarity on those measures, which is, in my opinion, when we have, despite different interests, we compromise for the greater good, for some different policy which we want to pursue, and for that we give up some of our taxing rights, some of our way to compete on taxation, and make solidarity on those issues. The third category, which in my opinion can be found within the European Union quite extensively, is cooperation, which is totally different from the first two categories on tax competition and solidarity, because on cooperation we have the same goal. I give you a list of examples, and those examples are actually success stories of the European Union and the tax cooperation. These are fight against tax evasion, fight against tax avoidance, and information exchange. It's not a surprise that we have such extensive directives on these areas. We even plan now the 8th amendment of the directive on administrative cooperation, which is a funny way to say information exchange. And that's the reason, because every country agree that we need better information to fight tax crimes, to fight tax evasion, and on that we have no different interests. What we have a problem is those areas where different interests are competing, and this is, for example, the corporate income tax area. And I give you two major examples where solidarity can be found, and another one where solidarity was not present, and actually, in my opinion, it's not even necessary to be present, because it's not about solidarity, it's about taxing rights and what it means for countries. My first example is the so-called ETAT directive, the anti-tax avoidance directive, which actually give countries the possibility and rules to fight tax evasion, and actually to make sure that tax bases are taxed there where substantial activities are done. And it is an example of tax solidarity, and it was a success story of the European Union and the OECD, because after 2008, every country agreed that we need something to make better, that multinational companies cannot make wholly artificial structures to avoid taxation within the European Union, to go to tax havens, or within the European Union to make structures and shell companies to avoid taxation and all. And in this area, some countries lost tax revenues, and for them it was a big win to have a new rule and have a new directive. On the other hand, other countries were not so happy by implementing those rules, because they, on the other side, were the losers of those anti-avoidance measures. And despite their loss, they still agreed on the rules, because it was politically the better way. It was a way to show solidarity, because tax avoidance was not an area which can be politically defended. and that was the political reality of tax avoidance. It's a very different story of the so-called free CTB directive, which is actually the Common Consolidated Corporate Tax Base directive. I understand that it's a very technical word. What it means to reform the whole corporate income tax system within the European Union and give an alternative profit allocation to the whole system, which is much simpler, much easier to implement. Just the problem with that it's a zero-sum game. It means when some country win new tax base, at the same time another country will lose on the issue, and nobody wants to lose. At the end of the day, taxation is a very economic question where we ask, would it cost us money to implement a reform? If yes, then the other question, would the economic benefit exceed those costs? If the answer to that is no, then obviously a country will not agree on that. And since within the European we have unanimous voting on taxes, it will be the end of the story. And it's okay. In my opinion, that's okay, because tax solidarity is not always necessary in all areas, because tax competition and competing for new investments and better investments is not harmful in itself, just if it goes in the wrong way. What tax issues and what regional integration is needed in this area? And I give you an example which is very hot topic within the European Union and the OECD, and that's the global minimum taxation. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? It's a two-sided coin, and it has two parts which can be related to the examples I've given to you on those. On one side, it is a way of fighting tax evasion and fighting tax avoidance. And on the other side, it is actually a barrier of tax competition. And the two sides compete at the negotiations. On the tax evasion side, I have to say it's a smart move. I personally was involved in the negotiations of this global minimum tax, and I have to say that it can work on fighting against tax evasion, because it is not doing a fragmented way as previous attempts did, but give a comprehensive solution on the incentives. It is no longer valid and no longer good for companies to make structures if they cannot have tax benefits from it. So it's a smart move to do it. On the other hand, it can construct a barrier for tax competition, because it leveled the playing field and forced countries to not go below that tax rate. If to translate it to you, it means that if a country gives a tax incentive for a multinational company to invest in that country, for example, Poland or Hungary or any other country gives a tax incentive, that tax incentive will not go to the company itself, but will go directly to the tax budget of the headquarters, of the home state of that company, because the global minimum tax will be collected there. And actually, it's not very comfortable to know that if you give up tax revenues in your country for making more tax incentives, tax investments there, then it's a problem. So The compromise can be a substance carve-out, which can look very differently. Countries are negotiating right now on a substance carve-out, which can make a balance on that tax compromise and tax policy. My last photo is on the role of OECD and the EU. I have a very high, I hold on a very high esteem both institutions on tax matters, because they are very good in what they are doing. The question whether they should be the protector of smaller economies, my answer is no, not really. They have the role to make it workable. They are not ordering the car, but they are responsible that the car and the engine will function properly. So in doing so, obviously they make the orders of other countries workable, and they delivers the results. And in doing so, I don't think that they have to protect anyone. Countries will need to maintain unanimity in tax matters, and that's the key point within the European Union to have the balance on solidarity and competition. And thank you very much for your attention. I believe my time is up. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer it.
Thank you, Dr. Szabaly. Stay with us, and now I would like to get a speech. Minister Jan Sarnowski from the Polish Ministry of Finance, Minister of Finance in Poland. And I assume you are going to talk about the great initiative you, together with many countries, our neighbors in that region of Europe, you made towards the cooperation, which is going to deliver some very good results for budgets, for the income to not only to the Polish budget, but as well to the budget of the neighbors, related to what I said, the fighting the mafia, VAT mafias. So be so kind, Minister Jan Sarnowski, hesitate that issue. And I think, the sharing your initiative you did is very important for our debate, because we are debating here and are going finally to put some report with recommendations, but as well we are trying to be critical to different things. But remember, the Schuman approach was usually be critical, but beside being critical, show what you can do. This is most important. And I think, that you are going to talk about is how we are doing things down. So go ahead, floor is yours, Minister.
Thank you very much. Am I heard? Everything okay with the connection?
Yes, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So it's actually also my opinion, not only to be critical, but also to be constructive and to push the world into the right direction. So once again, thank you for your invitation. The very problem is that the economic integration also within the European Union may also pose a fiscal threat. What does it mean? We are all perfectly aware of the economic consequences and economic advantages of being a part of the European Union. The existence of the internal market enables our companies to invest and trade freely all over Europe. This has a number of advantages for Poland, especially the acceleration of economic development, which also means an increase in budget revenues all over Europe and, of course, also all over our region. However, the common market also has its disadvantages and substantial threats that are very often not perceived as such by the general opinion. One of them are the tax havens, the lack of taxation of profit distributions between the member states, and introduction of some specific regulation by some countries may facilitate a result in opening a gap for the transfer of profits outside of the European Union without any taxation. A second threat is the tax criminality. The lack of border controls facilitates the use of empty invoices to commit VAT frauds. The consequence of these gaps are huge deficits in national budgets. The budgets lose hundreds of billions of euros each year due to these legal and organizational loopholes. How does it look in the corporate income tax system? According to the report, The Missing Profits of Nations, about 40% of multinational corporate profits are transferred to the tax havens every year. Another urgent problem is the fight against tax criminality. The VAT gap in the European Union amounts almost to 140 billion euro, of which around 60 billion are lost by the European Union countries due to the activity of the VAT mafias, due to activity of organized criminal groups. And what is actually 60 billion euro? It is as much as 60% of Poland's annual budget. So we can say Europe-wide, 60% of Poland's annual budget is delivered through VAT frauds to the accounts of mafias. And the very problem is that who is receiving this money? These are not international companies, investors, or CEOs who are simply avoiding taxation. This money goes just like the profits from drug or arms trafficking to finance terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda or the ISIS. Money from tax frauds helps to launch terrorist attacks all over Europe and also around the world. What does it mean? It means that the stakes, as far as fighting the tax criminality, are actually much, much higher than just shrinking of the national budgets. We are talking about the elementary security of European citizens. And the second problem are, of course, the consequences of this criminal activity on the European economy. By the aggressive tax planning and also by collaborating with tax criminals, dishonest companies make much higher profits and pay much lower taxes than their honest competition. And this often results in a failure of honest companies. The lack of healthy competition on the market slows down the economic growth and naturally prevents the development of European economies from accelerating to the maximum speed. And these problems have been known for decades and are, of course, gradually being solved at the European level through directives and regulations. But the effectiveness of these measures is limited, unfortunately, largely to the political reasons and, of course, due to the economic competition between European countries. And here arises a question whether the current situation is optimal and should it be changed by adding another principle to the catalogue of the EU values, a very practical and necessary value, namely the tax solidarity. The tax solidarity should be understood as ending the tax competition between member states and focusing on a cooperation. Today, member states are competing with each other on the field of taxation. Hence, the big success of Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Ireland as being the intra-European tax havens, and also hence the fact that the fight against tax criminality is largely unilateral, and is unfortunately not the top priority of the European Union. Countries simply do not want to share the technology they have developed. They do not want to share data about their entrepreneurs, and the Union itself, the European institutions, do not want to force countries to do so. It is a phenomenon that must be dealt with as soon as possible for the benefit of both the entrepreneurs and for the safety of all Europeans. So the idea of building a coalition of countries sharing the value of tax solidarity was developed in Poland. It comes directly from the Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, and the Prime Minister himself is one of its crucial supporters. He knows that the solution that our region especially is looking for will not come from the institutions of the European Union. It will also not come from the OECD. It can and must be procured regionally by the countries that are simply willing to take their own fate in their own hands and simply set an example, set a good example for other European countries, for the countries that up to this date were simply ignoring the problem. The essence of the Polish proposal can be summarized by two pillars. The first one is an offer to share knowledge and technology that was developed unilaterally, in our case, developed in Poland. The second element is strengthening the cooperation between tax authorities. And why Poland? Poland is in a great position to be a leader in this process because we have the best results in the European Union as far as fighting the tax evasion and tax criminality is concerned. We have developed on our own technological solutions that prove their effectivity in Poland that can also work with a great success in other countries. And the new element is that we want to be the first country not to keep these solutions for ourselves, but to make them available for every country that wants to make good use of them. So, what exactly happened in Poland? According to the European Commission's research, in the last 5 years, the VAT gap in Poland has decreased almost threefold, from more than 24% to 9.7%. What is most important, the process of improving the Polish VAT system has not slowed down during the pandemic. According to the estimates prepared for the European Commission a few weeks ago, in March 2021, last year, the Polish VAT gap further dropped by 1/5. It means that a few years ago, Poland was losing every fourth euro that should have been paid as VAT by the taxpayers, and now Poland loses only 1 in 12 euros. Statistically, it also means that the VAT gap in Poland is substantially lower than the EU average, 2 times lower than in Slovakia and 4 times lower than in Romania. In order to explain what happened in Poland, we must firstly say how actually tax criminals work. I would say they operate similarly to bank robbers or to criminals who are perpetrating credit frauds. In a tax carousel, the perpetrator uses fake invoices to apply for tax returns. When the tax office realizes that the return was paid without any reason, office wants the money back, but the perpetrator simply disappears. His bank account is empty, and therefore the only way to effectively deal with the frauds is detecting the fake invoices before the criminal applies for a tax return. And this proceeding is possible only by using technology, online reporting, big data analysis. And this is exactly what happened in Poland. Only a few years ago, in 2015, for example, all the information about transactions in Poland was reported only on paper. It was impossible to examine it with any technological tools. And since then, Polish administration experienced a technological revolution, and actually so did Polish enterprises. Through the gradual implementation of online reporting, currently we can automatically analyze over 100 million invoices every month. Polish administration is also the very first in Europe to adopt the anti-money laundering software to detect financial flows that are characteristic for VAT mafias. So, in consequence, the data is flowing to our bases much faster than ever, and the speed of it will also improve in the following years, because in October 2021, so this year, Poland, as the 4th country in the European Union, will provide businesses with an electronic invoices system. With its help, the tax criminals will be detected not after even few years of their activity, as it was effect a few years ago, and not after a few months, which is a current lifespan of a carousel fraud. The criminals will be detected only in few weeks. I would say technologically, it is like moving from a bicycle to a motorcycle. And you know what? We can be even faster, because you see, the key to the growing precision of our analysis lies in combining the data from different sources. Our algorithms compare and examine data from invoices, cash registers, financial flows between Polish companies. And now, through the Tax Solidarity Initiative, two things will happen. Firstly, for the first time in history, our algorithms will also examine the international trade, not only between Polish companies, but between Polish and foreign enterprises. Secondly, our partners will gain access to our technology. Once again, for the first time in history, our advanced big data and machine learning solutions will be used by other countries to combat tax criminality on their own markets. So the key to our success is starting a coalition for a tax solidarity and making it as large as possible, because the more countries enter the coalition, the more data we will receive, the more widespread our technological solutions will be. And you know, despite the pandemic, we are working on a fast forward mode, because our initiative began actually last year in January, when we hosted in the Ministry of Finance in Warsaw key officials from 21 European countries. All those financial officials from all over Europe expressed their great interest in strengthening the cooperation with Poland. Since then, we already signed declarations with the V4 countries, with Estonia and with Ukraine. And as a result, we are currently negotiating the intergovernmental cooperation agreements. And we are actually now in a very fortunate situation, because the very first of these international agreements was concluded and signed only a week ago in Warsaw. It is an agreement between Poland and Slovakia. As a consequence, in several months, starting July the 1st, our databases will be automatically fed by the information from the Slovak databases. On the other hand, Slovaks will gain access to our analytic technology. And it's not the end, because the next country to sign this kind of agreement will be the Czech Republic. The negotiations are already concluded. We are only waiting for a time slot in our ministers' calendars, simply to sign the documents. And what is even more fortunate, only a few days ago, after hearing about the agreement between Poland and Slovakia, we were contacted by the officials from two other countries, from Lithuania and Moldova, asking us whether they could join our initiative. So the Polish initiative is gaining political support all over our region, and it is happening even though this kind of tax integration makes us actually only European pioneers. You know, the agreement which was concluded between Poland and Slovakia is only the third agreement of this type in the world. Agreements of this kind were actually the two other concluded only between states that have always cooperated very closely with each other, between countries that have historical ties and that place particular trust in each other. Now, the only functioning agreements in the world are between Czech Republic and Slovakia, between Portugal and Spain, and for several days between Poland and Slovakia. So I would say that the tax solidarity, that the intergovernmental agreements on the tax cooperation are actually a new beginning for a fair, transparent, and I would also say trustworthy tax policy between countries and also in the European Union. You see, it builds a new European standard standard that we hope to implement in the whole European Union as a new field of European integration. We will also strongly support making it an official policy of the European Union and making the principle of tax solidarity one of the key European values. So we are deeply sure that it will benefit not only public safety and public finances, but above all the honest businesses in Europe. Polish entrepreneurs in Poland, Polish entrepreneurs doing their businesses in Slovakia, in Czech Republic, in Hungary, maybe in a few months also in Ukraine, in Moldova, in the Baltic states. These are all the honest businesses which are now facing the wide VAT gap in a large disadvantage. They have to compete with tax fraudsters. So it is a new quality, and we can proudly say that it all started here in Poland. Thank you very much for your attention. As I see, my time is up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sarnowski. I think you should be very much favored by the leaders in the European Union, because your project is going to deliver about 60 billion euros if you fight off the mafias, VAT mafias. So 60 billion euros, it says about 30% of the annual budget of the European Union. So I just put this number so that say that the return on that investment you are doing is a very huge. So it means that if we get from the mafias, VAT mafias, the 60 billion, we can decline the contribution to the European budgets. So this is a very high value. This is one remark. The second one is that, I would say this initiative is to some certain extent driven by a Robert Schuman spirit. And my call is to Germany and France. The France, Schuman is basically the citizen, had the citizenship of the France, but over some time, this region of Lorraine was under the government of Germany. So both these countries, if you, see that this influence, this, in a kind of a spirit of Robert Schuman, delivered to Polish, a team, Minister of Finance, and as well our great neighbors, Slovakia, Czech, Hungary, Estonia, Latvia, and all others who are joining this initiative, Moldavia, Ukraine soon, right? So it seems to be that we have very smart guys on that side of the Europe. So again, my call is to Germany and to the France. Do not hesitate to join the initiative, because we are, are facing a very big return on that investment. And as well, this is not only in the economic perspective very important, issue, but as well, I noticed when you were talking about that, and when I had the Dr. Chobola, I noticed you are very fascinated. So I noticed that you, in that, a very concrete economic process of taxes, you develop, a relationship. And this is a kind of a Schuman spirit. What he did, he developed the, a relationship, and he said, the most important are relationship, but create this relationship on a very concrete project, so that you are like soldiers. If you go into the field, when you are, side by side, you have to be very solidar, because if somebody is shot, then you need to bring him back, to save his life, right? So really, thank you very much. This, what you presented describes, many interesting colors of that, implementation and realizing the solidarity. So this is as well the goal of that debate, not just to, indicate, diagnose the problems, but as well, to offer some solutions. And now I would like, Dr. Sellera, director from Ministry of Finance in Poland, to, I assume, extend this basically issues related to, taxes from the perspective of the economic solidarity. And I would assume you would probably would be some kind to mention more about as well the tax havens, which are very, very, a very big problem in the Europe, and this is basically this this basically is against the competition. So the competition for many enterprises normally working against these enterprises or corporates who are in a tax haven is not equal. And I think this is a very, very strong case which we need to remove, because it is not as well democratic, because they are just, not paying taxes in, for instance, Poland or Hungary, and they just, living just, escaping in some other regions where the tax havens are existing. So, Dr. Sellera, go ahead. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Professor, for invitation. Let me focus on VAT matters, as I'm director of the VAT department, but I also refer shortly to the matter of tax havens. From the perspective of the VAT law, as you perfectly know, VAT is harmonized within the EU. Harmonized is not only substantive law, but the harmonized is only a procedure. So the exchange of data, exchange of information in the field of VAT is harmonized within the EU. But despite many different initiatives, the principle of unanimity in tax matters effectively blocks any reforms in the field of VAT, and this also blocks any reforms in the field of exchange of VAT data. At the EU level, we have, of course, Council regulation lays down principle of exchange of information in the field of VAT. At the same time, this regulation allows us to conclude agreements, international agreements in the field of VAT. So we have, at one time, we have Council regulation. At the same time, member states working bottom up and bottom down conclude international agreements. Why they do so? Because they are, Poland and many member states are convinced that the EU system is not fully effective. The exchange of data under the regime of EU regulation is not effective, and it's too slow for member states. We exchange, of course, VAT data between member states, but this exchange of information is insufficient. Even bodies of European Union admit that the current status of exchange of VAT data doesn't work properly. So that's why members, then that's why Poland is engaged in the process of building of coalition of states who will exchange data more effectively. And the EU regulation allows us to do so. The EU regulation requires only to notify such agreements. And we have, of course, as the Minister Sarnowski mentioned, we have examples of such bilateral agreements which were notified to the European Commission. And these bilateral agreements, they concerning new dimension of information exchange in the field of VAT. And this agreement supplement and support activities of the European Union. So we should see our actions as a support of EU efforts to make exchange of VAT data more effective and modern. And our initiative also creates new level of exchange of data and new model of exchange of data. Namely, we offer change, swift, from the exchange of data on request into modern system of automatic exchange of information. This is big revolution and the new approach to the sharing of knowledge and sharing of VAT data. Because if we exchange data on request, we are waiting and we are bound to wait for answers to information from other member states. Automatic exchange of data is new level of exchange of data, allows us to export and absorb data automatically. So these new agreements and our declarations refer to automatic exchange of VAT data, and we are strongly convinced that this approach is crucial. If you want to fight VAT frauds, if you want to reduce VAT gap, we have to act together and we have to exchange data more effectively within the European Union. So this approach is crucial for us. That's why the agreements and our negotiation with other member states refer to automatic exchange of data. Without this approach, the system which we have now is not effective. And we are happy that more member states understands our approach and they see great potential in the automatic exchange of VAT data. This exchange of data refers to information about taxable persons, about their activities, their history, and many different information which are crucial for our tax analysis. So the more information we get, the better tax analysis we perform. So that's why, from our perspective, from tax administration perspective, I mean, automatic exchange of data is huge step forward in fighting VAT fraudsters acting, of course, across many member states. Please bear in mind that VAT mafias are acting, involving taxpayers operating in many member states. So without information about their action in different member states, we cannot fight effectively VAT fraudsters acting in many member states. So VAT fraudsters also perfectly know and are perfectly aware of that, how the information flow is performed between member states. So the VAT fraudsters, VAT carousels, the brain beyond the VAT carousels are perfectly aware of that the exchange of information of data between member states is slow, it's too slow. They're aware of that. They're aware of that we exchange data based on EU regulation, but this data exchange are often offered and transferred in the different format. So we have to convert the information received, and this requires time. And the time is crucial, of course, because the fraudsters are acting very fast. And they know that member states need some time to absorb, convert information received, and they, of course, use that advantage. So automatic exchange of information give us that privilege that we receive information in precise format automatically, so we can act very quickly. And this is one of the key issues in fighting VAT mafia acting in many member states at the same time. So this is the one of the main pillars. That's why our initiative and the declaration signed and the agreements concluded lately with Slovakia is focused on this new level, a new dimension of information, of exchange of information in the field of VAT. So just to briefly summarize, of course, at the EU level, we have a legal system allowing to exchange us information in the field of VAT. But this system is not sufficient. That data exchange are exchanged very slowly, and we do not exchange many relevant data. So our proposal is to create new level of automatic exchange of VAT information based on international agreements or intergovernmental agreements, which allows us to absorb and export very quickly, precisely, well-prepared tax information, which are crucial for fighting VAT fraudsters acting in many member states at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So 1 minute for some conclusions. Mr. Dr. Choboli, just 1 minute. Do you like a minute to put some conclusions?
Thank you very much. Yes, to conclude our today's debate, I believe tax solidarity is necessary within the European Union. And actually, what you said on concrete projects, this is the way what can lead us to solutions. Concrete projects to fight tax avoidance, tax evasion is necessary, and I believe those initiatives which are right now negotiated can lead to better tax policy and tax area within the European Union. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, we are here to answer it.
Yes, thank you. And 1 minute, we are going to have some at the very end of our debate, some time for final questions and remarks. So stay with us. And now I would like for just 1 minute final conclusion from side of the Minister Jan Sarnowski, please.
One more. Right. In order to summarize our discussion, I must underline the fact that the tax solidarity is greatly needed both in direct taxation as far as fighting the tax havens is concerned, and in indirect taxation when we have to face the VAT mafias, the tax criminality. There are many fields on which the cooperation should actually take place. The first level is bilateral between countries, between neighboring states that can simply set an example and show that some solutions simply work and can be and also should be implemented by other countries, maybe by international organizations and by supranational alliances such as the European Union. The other levels are the OECD and European level. After proving that our solutions simply work, we will definitely stipulate the introduction of our solutions on the European level. And in order to do so, we have to gather a very strong alliance of countries that trust each other, that want to follow the similar policies, the policies of solidarity and the policies especially of honesty and cooperation. And this kind of alliance is actually currently being built. It is strongly supported by the countries of our region, and just like Professor Krysiak as our host here, I strongly believe that after seeing our success, also the big European players, especially from the Western Europe, France, Germany, will also join the initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now stay with us, of course, Minister Sarnowski. We will approach at the end some as well a short discussion. Now, Dr. Philip Ludwin, we would like, you talk about the super state ideology rejects the solidarity. Is that true, that super state ideology rejects the solidarity? We don't like to have the super state. We would like to have a community of European nations. But would you be so kind, to extend that statement and to prove that the superstate, delivers ideology, delivers many negative side effects, but as well, could you prove that it rejects the solidarity in a general terms? The floor is yours, please.
Yes, of course, I could. Do you hear me? Do you see me?
Yes, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, the voice is great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me, of course. Glad to be here. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. As for your question, 1 month ago, I described during our debate a theory of federalism proposed by Spinelli and Rossi. And as you surely know, Spinelli and Rossi were great supporters of strong federalism in Europe. Spinelli and Rossi want to create new pan-European federal political organism very quickly and very fast after the Second World War. The process, according to them, the process has to be fast, because otherwise it would fail. And of course, today I don't want to repeat my speech that I presented 1 month ago, but one point of the Spinelli's theory, in my opinion, is important for our today's debate. I mean the proposed method of establishing new political federation according to Spinelli and Rossi. Spinelli didn't believe that the process of establishing this new pan-European federal community, that this process cannot occur by cannot be introduced by democratic means under democratic circumstances. Democracy fails in this case, according to these two authors. Therefore, Spinelli proposed a revolutionary method of establishing new European super state. Only the Revolutionary Party could do this. And this is one of the most important problem in the whole their theory, in my opinion. Because if you want to create such new political community from top down, not from bottom up, not in the process of slow social and historical evolution, but if you want to do this from top down, you will create an artificial community, and there is a question whether such a super state is based on real solidarism. We may ask whether this super state is a community of societies of solidarity. In my opinion, it's not. If we want to create in Europe a real organic pan-European community of different nations, societies, and so on, we have to act bottom up. And in my opinion, it's the only possible way do so. One might suppose that we have two different ways of creating pan-European community. The first one is a top-down method, and the second one is bottom-up. Of course, the last one is very it's much more difficult to realize, to introduce. But in my opinion, this is the only one. This is the only one way to do something solid in Europe. And the supporters of radical federalism, Spinelli and Rossi were the most important supporters of radical federalism. We can say revolutionary federalism too. They believed that a federalistic revolution organized from top down can succeed, can result in creating a real organic pan-European society. And in my view, this approach is a very big mistake made by these two authors, Spinelli and Rossi, the authors of the Ventotene Manifesto. I think that a solution for Europe should be as follows. Firstly, we have to create strong links, strong bonds between independent and sovereign European societies and nations. This should be a first step in obtaining our goals. And after that, after this process will be finished, we will be able to take into account a possibility of introducing some supranational forms of cooperation and maybe some governmental bodies. And there's no other possibilities. We cannot achieve this goal when we want to do faster and from top down. You know, it's an illusion. In my opinion, it's an utopian thinking. In fact, it's an utopian wishful thinking that we could create a new political federation without taking into consideration all cultural, historical, and social factors. The departure point is false in the theory of radical federalism, and therefore this political project has to fail. And finally, take a look at our modern current condition of European nations. After 30 years after the Maastricht Treaty, can we conclude that that the links, real, actual, organic links between European societies are much more stronger. Of course, they are stronger in some cases, for sure. But I don't see that after 30 years, after these 30 years, we have created a real organic society, pan-European society, community. Why? No, the main reason I explained, because supporters of federalism want to do so in top-down manner, in top-down way. So, to sum up, in my opinion, this way of acting, this direction, should be abandoned very quickly, as soon as possible, because we maybe, but it's true. It's true now that we are the witnesses. We see that the federalistic solution for Europe cannot deliver us, cannot guarantee us a factual manner of creating a solid and long-lasting European organic community. So maybe it's the conclusion of my short answer here, and I think it could be a good starting point for the following discussion. It's worth taking into consideration it.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ludwin. Now, I would appreciate for speech Tomasz Sakiewicz, a journalist, a famous journalist in Poland, and famous not only in Poland, but I think in many countries, in Hungary and in many countries in Europe and over the sea in the United States. And I would like, you try to hesitate the following questions. As a journalist perspective, why and how the lack of economic solidarity can be the destruction of European community? And what are the examples of the lack of economic solidarity at the European Union? So go ahead, the floor is yours.
I have a problem that because I completely don't believe in so high values in the European Union like any solidarity, and they prove us that it's completely impossible and it doesn't work. And there are few reasons of this situation. First reason, because solidarity in a group, it's very high values, and high values must be based on any system, a very strong system. And in the idea of fathers of Europe, maybe this system exists, but now there is any system which we can base so high values like solidarity, because it was completely destroyed. Now we have big experiment to cast any values and build a new system based on Marxism, neo-Marxism philosophy. But the major problem that nobody explain us what this system should look like, and how values will be important, and what are the meaning of the different values which they show us. Because the solidarity doesn't mean solidarity, the justice doesn't mean justice, the law doesn't mean law, and so on. And we have no any system which we can base values, and so important values like solidarity. Solidarity is very typical value for Christian community. It's based on Christian philosophy. Of course, not only Christian, but for us is well known from Christian philosophy. And when they cast it, they have no possibility to based on any system, and they don't propose any more, which we can base new philosophy and these values. But it doesn't mean that solidarity isn't possible. Of course, we can build solidarity based on rules and benefits, and it's more possibility. Because we can find a way and find a border where, for different countries and different government for he's active in the European Union, and to explain there is a border of solidarity and there is no solidarity after this border. And we must base it on benefits. Now, maybe there will be a time they came back to the Christian system, but now they don't want. And we must be very sure that in a close future it will be not possible to come back to Christian roots because most of European governments and European nations don't want to come back to Christian roots. I'm very sure of it, and I'm very sorry of it. But now we have this problem. And if we are talking about solidarity, we must talk about rules and benefits because of this solidarity. And it's any way to discuss. Of course, it doesn't mean that we should fight for the Christian spirit of European Union. We should start to fight, and it's a very long way. But we have very good tradition of this fighting from Polish experience, historical experience. It's a tradition of First Republic, when there was alliance between no Christian Lithuanian, Catholic Poland, Orthodox from Kyiv, a lot of Jews which live in whole Poland, a lot of German which live in this time, and 100 years later also Protestant. First, it was based on rules and benefits. But very quickly comes Christian ideology, which connect different countries, these agreements, and help to survive 500 years. This first European Union was first republic between different nations in the Middle Europe. We can use this tradition. And we must remember that first Polish Republic didn't start on Christian roots because part of nation which make agreements were not Christian. But after 100 years, every of them were Christian. And Christian was a better, best connection and best ideology. But this nation grew up to find it, that not only political, not only business, also high values. And they find that solidarity is necessary to defend, to fight with enemies, to build a republic, and to the moment when they were they have solidarity. First Republic was strong. When solidarity collapsed, First Republic started to collapse. And I think that's not accident that the biggest independent movement in communist time in Middle Europe has named Solidarity. Because we understand what means solidarity. So, solidarity first is agreement between people. The second, between nations. And the third, between states. And people in solidarity find more and more roots, Christian roots, and European roots, old Europe roots based on cooperation. And I think that this way is any chance to build any solidarity in this Europe. When the values are used to press weakest countries to make business stronger countries. When values lose his meaning. When any cooperation is collapsing, when is any crisis like this. When we have a very big problem with cooperation with very sure spheres like fighting with pandemia, because this cooperation is very difficult. And why we have problem? Because European nation and European Union really can't cooperate. And the procedures, typical procedures where they used were more important than people. That's why it collapsed. And what does it mean for journalists? For journalists, it's the biggest problem. Because for us, it's the most important to tell people the truth. The Pope, Gregory the Great, tell that it's better to have problem, to be ashamed, but to tell truth or not tell truth. And for us and for all journalists means that sometimes we must be easy rider. Sometimes we can't do what the other people expect from us. We must tell the truth, every people. And solidarity has a completely different meaning, because solidarity means that we are telling the truth, every people. But in European Union, there is a very big problem with censorship. And we see it in a lot of spheres and a lot of parts of life. Political correctness damage a lot of spheres of discussing. And sometimes we must pay different problems because we touch problems which they don't allow us. Politics, parties, governments, companies, different institutes allowed to discuss problems like gender, like LGBT, and they expected that we will take every ideas which they proposed without discuss. If you start to discuss, you have a lot of problems. What means solidarity in this moment? that every journalist, every free people, every European people will help, will support the people who are enough brave to discuss difficult problem. And we should fight not to be frightened by political correctness, because when people will start to afraid, when people will be frightened, the freedom will die. Without freedom, there will be no independence. There will be no solidarity. There will be nothing what people needs from European Union, from democratic country. And I'm looking the people, the journalists in European Union, which are not afraid of censorship, which not afraid of left idea, which pressed whole discussion. And it's not very easy, because a lot of journalists now afraid off the record. They, of course, they can discuss different problems, but not public. I remember communist time. I was active in underground, and I published in underground articles as a very young man. And sometimes when I'm looking for today's tendency, I'm really afraid that we are coming back to one part of communist time. It's very deep censorship, which is not only in media, but also in our brains. That people start to afraid of discuss different problem. And we need solidarity with the journalists, with the politics, which tell the people that you have law to discuss different problems. Don't be, don't afraid. And I think that our cooperation between Polish and Hungarian citizen movement show European people that it's possible. We have different meetings in Budapest, in Warsaw, and the other countries of to show that cooperation is possible. That the other point of view that it's that dominate the European Union is possible, and we are expecting that the other people will come to us and will not afraid. And what we really have done for the last 10 years, it's a real solidarity between Hungarian and Polish people. We support ourselves in different problems when the Hungarian and Polish governments are attacked, or Hungarian and Polish movements are attacked by European politics. And it works. It's really work, because people see that they are not alone. It's real solidarity, and it's not only idea. It works from 10 years. And I invite you for our meetings to Budapest, to Warsaw, to show that it's possible.
It's frozen. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Tomasakiewicz. You know, really, I believe you as a fighter against a communist and the underground, you know, fighter. You shed the lights on the hope. You said that there is a hope. There is not the situation which doesn't have any exit. And now I perceived your basically speech as a call to all European journalists and to all people in Europe whose hearts are beating for the Schuman to unite. So the power we can get by uniting, by united, forces and efforts, and I mean all brains and the people with a different, competencies. We can do that. So we can come back to the Schuman's Europe. And really, that was a great speech. But, as this is a goal of this debate, it's not just only to diagnose the situation, to speak about how it is, but, the main, goal is just to do and to implement the conclusions we got during this debate. So let's think about that, how to organize this united movement, pan-European movement, Schumann's movement, and this basically experience, this knowledge you have, and not only you. I remember a few months ago, I was talking to some journalist, the lady from France on the conference in Poland, and she was saying exactly what you spoke about. She is thinking differently than his basically principles are, forcing her to write. So she said, we have belief in East European countries, in journalists from that countries, in the people, leaders, politicians, and the leaders in the politics. So, but this, is basically a challenge for a united movement, and really there is much power inside the atomized, people around the Europe, and they exactly with a nuclear bomb. So to explode this, we need a critical mass. So let's, as a conclusion of that, to build a critical mass. And now I would like, of course, stay with us, Mr. Tomasakevich. And now I would like, to speak for 20 minutes, Minister Paweł Jabłoński, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs. About the minister perspective, thank you very much indeed that you, had the time to join. We know how you are very busy with the different duties, and be so kind, to just hesitate about, Nord Stream 2 as a case of a lack the economic solidarity. How this project can support return to the economic solidarity at the European Union, and made the economic model of European Union work well without the well-functioning of the Free Seas project. So be so kind to hesitate these issues, and thank you for coming. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me on this very important debate. I'm very glad to be here. I had the opportunity to listen to majority and debate through YouTube, and it was indeed a very interesting, very interesting opinions. I think that aside from this philosophical or political aspect that was debated very strongly about what means solidarity, what solidarity means, what values it is, how much is it a base of functioning of the EU or other forms of national cooperation. What I'd like to focus more is the practical application of solidarity and practical application of certain policies that may or may not be aligned with this one of the core principles of the EU, indeed. And I think that one of the most interesting factors is the one that was already mentioned tonight about the tax solidarity and the issue of unequal treatment of in terms of tax policies in various countries, in various European countries. We have explicitly listed several countries by the European Commission, which is it's no secret that the European Commission is not very often that much focused on solidarity as it should be, but it has indeed listed several countries of the so-called old Europe that are openly introducing norms and regulations, effectively leading to not only to tax evasion, tax fraud, but also to money laundering and other financial crimes. And these financial crimes, as we all know, these money laundering, tax evasion amounts to over 150 billion euros per year. So it is equivalent to EU budget. And this is one of the crucial issues that is very often overlooked when we speak about European solidarity, because when these money are being funneled out of European taxpayers' pockets, then we all suffer. And the more we suffer here in Central Eastern Europe, in the countries that only had the opportunity to turn into free market economy just 30 years ago to a democracy, be it liberal democracy or conservative democracy, however we name it, it was only democracy after in 1989. So with the lower level of development, the starting point, which was way later than developed countries such as Netherlands, Luxembourg, and other countries in Western Europe, we have been suffering significantly more, and it's much more difficult for us to close this gap. And this is why we decided to take the matters in our own hands, so to say, among the countries of Central Eastern Europe, to start the initiative that would help us fill this gap. This is the initiative, and allow me to start with this, because I believe no matter what we think, what we say about Nord Stream 2, and I will dwell on that a little bit further, it is more important that we focus on our own development and that we are able to fill the development gap which we still face. And as all the estimates show, all the estimates provided not just by national governments or by the European Union, but also by objective international financial institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, the infrastructural gap in Central Eastern Europe is so big that only in this decade, only until 2030, we need to spend over 600 billion euros just on infrastructure investments, roads, rail networks, energy grids, digital infrastructure, just to catch up with the West. So this is the size of the difference between Central Eastern Europe and Western countries that had the opportunity in history. They were on the right side of history, so some people like to say it, but in fact they were just pure lucky. They were not so close to the Soviet Union at that time. And this is why we decided to start this. The initiative started in 2015 and 2016 on the initiative of President of Poland, Andrzej Duda, and then President of Croatia, Kolinda Grabar-Kitarovic. And they revived an old idea, an idea that was debated politically, philosophically over 100 years ago, the intermarium, so between the three seas, the Baltic, the Adriatic, and the Black Sea. So the countries of this region that have there are many smaller or bigger differences between them, but we also share many more. We also share many more traits, many more traditions. Historically, we're very much aligned. Obviously, there were sometimes arguments, conflicts, even open wars between the countries in our region, as you could say about every region in the world. But nonetheless, it seems only rational to put aside these differences, especially when so much joins us, so much unites us now. And what unites us at the most is the need for development, the need for stronger cohesion with the rest, with the Western Europe, with the rest of the EU. And this is what we decided to start. And what was in the beginning a political project gradually develops into more economically oriented, infrastructure development oriented. Right now, the significance shifts much more from the pure political level to more practical applications, so joint projects building infrastructure, cross-border connections such as Via Carpathia, which would unite would unite countries from the Baltic Sea, starting actually from the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, through Poland, Slovakia, Romania, down to Greece, actually to Hungary as well. So these connections, these new grids, which were lacking on the north-south axis, because we have been investing very strongly in west-east connections. Obviously, that was also supported by the Western countries that wanted to have easier connections to us. Now we need to catch up on the north-south axis, and this is the main principle behind the Three Seas initiative. And it is indeed based on the solidarity principle. It is indeed based on this because if we want to develop, we need to develop together. We can obviously say that if we support constructing better roads that would be connected to the ports or on the Baltic Sea in Lithuania or Estonia or Latvia, then some could say, yeah, well, then this is a competition for Polish ports. And we hear this very often. But in fact, the more we develop together, the more we develop, the more we help develop also our neighbors in solidarity, we make whole region stronger, more resilient, more self-reliant. We're able to be stronger all together as neighbors, as partners, and as friends, even though not all the countries are between each other on the same level of friendship, but this is unnatural. And I think if we look at how the Three Seas initiative develops now, it actually resembles something which has taken place in the 50s in the West, because the countries of Western Europe after Second World War were also divided, were also different, and they were also competing against each other for many, many years. But the founding fathers, first of all, Robert Schuman, they decided that in order to put aside these differences for common goal of development, also for keeping peace and maintaining stability and maintaining security in Europe, they need to work out the differences and develop together based on solidarity. So obviously, when we look at this now, this was the principle back then. Today, when we look at the European Union, this is obviously debatable whether the principle of solidarity is still applied in practice, and this has been debated extensively also today. I believe it's not completely gone out of the European perspective, but it is definitely much more present in our region than in many countries of the Western Europe, because unfortunately, many countries of the Western Europe tend to be actually more anti-integration, anti-European now, because the principle of cohesion means for especially those well advanced, those richer countries, those wealthier, that they need to share, they need to be able to contribute more to European budget. We have seen this during the debates over the EU budget last year. We have seen, especially in a couple of countries, so-called frugals, in the Netherlands, in Scandinavian countries, that they were very reluctant to put up to give something more because they are developed, but they start to believe that the solidarity shouldn't be there no more if it doesn't pay off for them directly. We keep repeating, we keep showing the numbers that it actually is beneficial for every country in Europe, and those wealthier, more developed countries are actually benefiting from the single market even more because their businesses can develop faster, they can find new customers, work together with partners in other countries. And this is something which I think they sometimes forget. It is our role to constantly remind them how important this is to work on actual numbers, because these numbers are available. So this is what we do also in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I think the fact that we were able, as a union, to reach a consensus, to reach a compromise on the budget, quite ambitious one, with the recovery fund as well, despite fierce opposition of certain, especially northern countries, proves that solidarity is not dead yet. It's close It's definitely not as vivid as it was 50 or 70 years ago, but it's still there. And it's our job to keep it alive, to keep it stronger, and to develop it further. So we will be doing this in Central Europe through initiatives such as 3C's initiative, such as the V4, the Visegrad Group, which is also, some argue that there are political differences between Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. And there are, obviously. It's nobody ever tried to pretend there are no differences. But we are able to overcome this because this is in our common interest as a region to overcome these differences, to work together for a common goal. And this should also be a similar case for Europe. Stronger development over our differences. And this brings me to the subject that was pointed out by Professor Krysiak in the first place. So the issue of Nord Stream 2 and general approach of the EU to policies that may be beneficial for some countries, or not even countries, but some businesses in one or two countries, but detrimental to whole Europe, the whole system of stability, of security on our continent, not just in the EU, but most of all for our neighbors. And Poland has been very vocal and very consistent against this project, not just in the EU, not just within the EU, but also talking to our American partners, which we keep saying and then repeating, reminding the simple truth that without strong transatlantic alliance, EU wouldn't be able to exist in peace as long as it has been, because without NATO, without US guaranteeing our safety, we wouldn't simply be able to deter the threat from the East. And this is what we keep repeating, what we keep reminding. I think last year and the events that took place just across our eastern border, the rigged elections in Belarus, the assassination attempt on Navalny, and also the events that took place before that, the assassinations in Germany, assassinations in the UK, obviously the situation in Ukraine that's constantly worrying, the ongoing war in Donbass, the illegal annexation of Crimea. All this keeps being a big problem that Europe should never overlook, that Europe should never pretend it doesn't exist. So this is unfortunate that many politicians, especially in Germany, because this is related to business needs of certain German businesses, keep pretending it is non-existent, that keep pretending that current regime in Russia can be treated as a regular business partner. This is unfortunately a sign that the spirit of solidarity is not omnipresent, to say the least, and this is a worrying development. But at the same time, we see some silver linings, because not just politicians in Europe, but also on the other side of the Atlantic, before the elections, so with the Trump administration, but also with the current administration, universally bipartisan sanctions instituted by Congress of the United States. I think it also shows that Polish consistent position, or not just Poland, but other countries in our region, especially in the Baltics and Ukraine too, that this has been successful to some extent. Obviously, we can't be sure whichever way it would go. The project is very close to be finished, so it is unfortunately likely it will be concluded. Our role now is to keep pushing against it, to keep reminding how dangerous it might be, because it's not a political, it's not an economic project, but it's purely political agenda, and actually a tool of potential military appliance. It can be used as a means of warfare, even hybrid war, but still through cutting gas. When the gas starts flowing through Nord Stream 2, then Ukraine can be cut off their gas supply and effectively be put at Putin's mercy. So this is huge potential. This has huge potential implications for Europe's safety. We need to keep reminding that, and And Poland, as a country which always has been very vocal about this policy, we will keep doing this. Obviously, reminding that economic interests are important, but much more important thing is security, safety, and acting in solidarity with the rest of European countries. That would be, I think, the most important these aspects that I wanted to mention. So thank you, Professor, for giving me the floor. And obviously, if there's another point tonight in the debate, I'll be glad to join that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mr. Minister, for that, speech, and stay with us. And I really appreciate, contribution of all speakers and disputants, and that basically we discussed today this solidarity. And I think we identified that there is a big gap between that solidarity which existed after the Second War during the Robert Schuman, de Gasperi, and Konrad Adenauer had together worked on that, community of European nations. So there is a gap, no doubts. Each of you identified some certain area of that gap. And now I would appreciate, because we are going to write the report, at the end of this year, after the 12 debates, I would appreciate that each of you, if you don't mind, to send the organizers 1 or 2 pages of your certain, recommendations for removing this gap. So what is the gap according to you, and how to remove that, and what resources or what measures have to be made to remove that gap? So we would appreciate, to have this, because, this debate without the report, and then the report we are going to send to different, European institutions, to as well as national parliaments, so that to basically, continue that debate. But to continue that debate, is going to be based on some certain recommendations. So to be more concrete about that, what we discussed and what we concluded. And as a final, our today discussion and debate, I would suggest that starting from the Professor David Reichert. David, are you with us still? So I would appreciate if you just, within each of you, within 2 minutes, just, try, it's a challenge, try, to, indicate some recommendations for decline the gap in the solidarity with, especially economic solidarity, but not only that. So go ahead, Professor David Reichert.
Thank you very much. I was very pleased to listen to some of the high quality talks here today. And I would just begin with the question of economic solidarity. If we think about the fundamental question that not our political elites have in America or in Europe, but what do people, average people in the United States and average people in Europe, what do they want economically? And for me, the answer is clear. Jobs, jobs, jobs. They want employment. And I would say, from our discussion and from my own study, the neoliberal global economic model that America and Europe followed, had put so much faith in the 1990s and the new millennium, has really turned into a nightmare for many people. This outsourcing of hundreds of thousands of possible jobs in America and Europe to other countries. And we focused on China, but it's not only China, obviously. I mean, you know, I live in Slovakia, and in East Slovakia, there's great unemployment out there. And where are the initiatives to make the T-shirt, to make the shoes, to make the masks in East Slovakia or Eastern Poland or Romania or other countries? We need employment. So in a way, I think our political elites have failed us. We talk about economic solidarity. Certainly, there's got to be solidarity with the people in a democratic situation, and we don't see that. You know, I remember in the late 1990s, the situation in Slovakia, when there was a change in government to the government of Mikuláš Dzerinda and his very prescient economic minister, Ivan Mikloš. And they initiated a fantastic program of foreign direct investment. They invited the car companies. They invited Volkswagen into Slovakia, Kia. They invited Peugeot. They've got Jaguar, Land Rover. So that in a couple of years, Slovakia became the largest auto producer per capita, you know, when you factor in the population in the world, much more than Detroit. So amazing. So it can be done. And I believe that what we're seeing, this political populism in the United States and in Europe is a result of, or this economic nationalism is a result of the failed neoliberal global politics that our elites have followed. And so I would just conclude that an economic solidarity between the United States and Europe would recognize our common history, our common Judeo-Christian culture, our values, our links, going back to the Marshall Plan and so forth, and that we should favor each other. You know, maybe some of you know that in the last year, China has overtaken the United States as the European Union's largest trading partner. Amazing, just in the last year. So there needs to be some kind of a rebalance. And economic solidarity, from my perspective, would involve a new trade agreement between the United States and Europe that is not, you know, radically economically liberal, but a fair trade agreement where we respect each other and recognize the real common interests that we both have. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Professor, for the concrete recommendations. We put the note for your recommendations, and Professor Ben Oni Ardelen, are you with us? Professor Ben Oni Ardelen from Romania, are you with us, Professor? I know Professor was busy today. He was going to leave for his duties. So now, Professor Pablo de la Fuente, 2 minutes for your recommendations to remove the gap.
Well, do you listen to me?
Yes, I hear you. Now now we see you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, for me, the most important recommendation is creating Europe. Is very hard to fight against a superstructure like European Union. But, for example, when the minister talk about, for example, for Poland, is a very good thing. The strategy of the Visegrad group is, first of all, create not only an axis Paris-Berlin, create a society in Europe of free nations and with a good balance, and after that, every country must think in its strategies of negotiating. In this case, no. I am very well. I think that perhaps the other speakers wanted to contribute, but I think is the most important. Create multilateral and bilateral space for cooperating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now, Dr. Cioboli, be some kind to put the recommendations for removing the gap of the solidarity, please.
Thank you, Professor. Yes, sure. I can give a concrete recommendation as well. So from a tax point of view, I believe what Europe needs to do is to make difference and actually choose those aspects of taxation which need intervention, and cooperate on every aspect which can provide more tax certainty, ease the administration cost of companies, and make the whole European Union more competitive on the world market, if it's possible, and then do it. On the other hand, my recommendation is also to have a limit on forced solidarity, and try to balance where cooperation and solidarity is needed, and let countries do the competition where it's not harmful to compete, because market economies are built on the idea that competition can be good. And I go back what another speaker said on job creation, that at the end of the day, solidarity with people means to create jobs, to make more competitive on the world market, and enhance the economic growth in your own country, because that's at the end of the day the solidarity what is really needed, and not a misunderstood solidarity to limit every part of the tax aspects. Where tax solidarity and cooperation is needed, that's another case, and concrete cases like VAT proves that cooperation and solidarity can be found and should be pursued within the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Szaboli. And now Minister Jan Sarnowski, be so kind to put your recommendations to remove a deficit of solidarity, please.
What we can do, and what especially Poland can do, is setting an example. Not only Poland, but also many other countries in our region see the fields on which solidarity is more than needed, and that they are more than ready to cooperate. What they need is a leader. All they need is a center to which they could gravitate, where they could look for inspiration. Poland is actually predestined and ready to fulfill this role, and on many fields, both in the Free Seas Initiative and on the area of taxation, we are currently doing this job. So staying on this direction, setting the aims, and being consequent in delivering the products. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Minister. And now I would like to appreciate Tomasz Sakiewicz, journalist. Are you still with us, Tomasz? Are you there, or he left probably? So, okay. So as a final, Minister Paweł Jabłoński. So please be so kind to put your final recommendations for some, decline the solidarity in the European Union. Go ahead.
Thank you. I can only concur with my predecessor, the last speaker, Minister Sarnowski. This is our role, to set an example, to lead, because many countries actually tend to expect some ideas that they are able to follow, and it is actually happening already. Poland is the country that started building coalition for fair taxation, for fighting VAT gaps, for generally a more just approach to tax regulations. We are in this together with countries of our region. We are in this together also with some could say unlikely partner, but in fact very much aligned with us, like France. And we will be doing this, will be continue continuing to do it because fighting these differences, fighting these inequalities, these unjust regulations that put at risk the principle of solidarity is one of the biggest challenges for the European Union. So we will be setting an example, we'll be building coalition, and I believe that we stand pretty good chance of success because the tide, politically speaking, is also turning, not maybe in all areas to the direction that we would enjoy, but there are also some positive tendencies which we should be using for the benefit of all European citizens, not just citizens of Central Europe, but in general. This will be good for most of them. So we will keep doing this. We'll keep leading and building these coalition. Prime Minister of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki, is definitely focused on doing that and fight these tax inequalities. And I think we will be doing much more of this in the coming months. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Minister. You know, since we are talking about the very, the most important, issues, not only in that debate, but in the previous one and the next coming 10 debates up to the December, most important, the issues which are basically interested by leaders in our country, in Hungary and other countries, our European countries. So these topics are very important for our Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, Viktor Orban, the leaders in Romania, leaders in Croatia, Slovenia, Portugal, and many others. I have many voices from Sweden, for instance, they are very, focused on that, basically approach of a Schuman, and they don't like superstate, and this is basically is around the a concept, and if the fundament and the concept is right, so everything is going to be right. So as Schuman said, the most important are relationship. And the final, the speech of the Minister Jabłoński was, saying about the coalition. So let's reward that saying about the relationship. What Schuman, mentioned as a crucial, most important, a factor, the relationship. So I really appreciate, how many concrete, conclusions, recommendations arrived from your speeches today, and be so kind, to deliver me. I really please. It's I am not commending you. I really ask you for the favor to send down 1 or 2 pages of your main statements, of your main recommendations. We really are going to share this with these leaders in Poland, in Hungary, in all European countries. And at that point, I really thank you very much indeed for all of you who you are very busy and you find the time to join us. And let's, promote that debate. I ask all of you to promote. Let's, make this, debate as our common job, to create a pan-European, basically, a movement of a people whose hearts are beating for Schuman. Okay, just make this happen together, to integrate and to create a critical mass around the concrete issues. And I would like to thank you as well for co-organizers of these debates. Our co-organizers, so Institute of Schuman Thought is the organizer, and co-organizers are Ordo Juris, very known, organization, and as well, Economic Forum. This is very important and known organization, which is every year organizing very important events. Inviting many, experts from around the Europe, and as well, a FAT co-organizer is a European University under the name of Robert Schuman, servant of God Robert Schuman, which is located in Poland. And I like to invite, other organizations as co-organizers, as hosts of that events. National parliaments from around Europe, the chairmen of the national parliaments, the different parties around Europe. Again, all people of a goodwill, This, debate we are going to basically dedicate for that renewing the European Union. Renewing, coming back to that, what Schuman said, the unity, solidarity, and peace. And for Schuman, this statement was a kind of a logic implication. So Schuman said, if there is a unity, you can, expect that arise the solidarity. And then after the solidarity exists, you can expect that the peace, is a result of that. So the logic statement means if the previous component is false, so then the next one is false as well. So the implication, all of you knows very well, this, concept of logic concept. So what we can ask at the final, basically at the very end of our meeting, there is in Europe unity. I think it's a question mark, because if there would be a unity, then we would be surrounded by the solidarity. So we have many examples of a lack of the solidarity. And the lack of the solidarity, according to the statement of Schuman, says that the lack of the solidarity, implies a lack of a peace. And we know if there is a lack of a peace, so it means that the opposite to the peace is war. So let's really try to come back to that, reasoning, to that way of thinking of Robert Schuman, and take this serious and do not neglect that the lack of the solidarity, because in the long term, the lack of the solidarity will lead to the war. Probably not the war in the purely military way, but to some certain war which will finally basically bring to the bankruptcy of this great idea of Robert Schuman, who integrated many people of a goodwill, not only a Christian, but he was fruitful enough. Okay, so I see the Minister Paweł Jabłoński is trying to say some, at least one sentence, right? Hello?
I only concur. I can only concur. I wasn't trying to speak anymore, but I had already my time. But thank you for the invitation. I obviously agree with what you said, that this is one of the major achievements of the European Union over the last 70 years is to keep peace on the continent, much more than the economic achievement. Yeah. So in fact, this is the main thing we should keep in mind, that if this project would be to fail, then we would risk actually getting back to what it was in the first half of 20th century, which I think.
Yeah, so thank you very much again. And just I would like to remind you that we have broadcasted this debate to many social media around Poland and Europe. In a total, the number of this subscribers of this social media is over 1 million. So I don't know how many were participating in that during our debate, but this, a debate is recorded on that media, and many of the, subscribers are going, they have chance, to play this back. So this is going to be, I think, a very big feedback. And thank you very much for all great speakers and disputants and all listeners and participants of that debate. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next debate, 24th of April. 24th of April, the same time, Saturday, 4 p.m. up to 8 p.m.
A nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Sam, siedzimy do końca, żeby... So thanks a lot, yeah. Thanks a lot. Pani Ewo?
Dziękuję, gratuluję, panie profesorze. Tak, ja patrzyłam.
Ja mówiłem, nie?
No, czyli da się.
Ja dotrzymuję słowa.
Dziękuję, naprawdę bardzo dziękuję.
Jak to pięknie.
Wszystko dobrze.
Super. Wszystko w porządku, wszystko się udało zgodnie z planem, czasowo idealnie.
Tak, miało być do 20. To gratulacje. No to pewnie państwo są zmęczeni, co? Bo to jednak kilka godzin koncentracji takiej najwyższej.
Nie, ja pani powiem,